I've heard it said before, like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity. And it's so true.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and the perhaps never to be defined existential Mr. Rogers. I accidentally erased all my graphics for my intro, so you'll have to wait till the next Robservations to see those graphics, but you've all seen them before because I've been showing them for years. I know it probably diminishes your enjoyment of this show. I hope not. This is, of course, Robservations, episode number 1004. I'm Rob, casting at you, you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. You know, sometimes people just demand things of me, and this show is one of those times. A lot of people wanted to know what I thought. I mean, we talked about Superman. People want to know what I thought of Superman, so we're going to talk Superman, and we're going to talk some other things too, like, I don't know, toxic fandom, because that's always something that gets the crowd riled up, which is fun to talk about. And I'll talk about a little bit of my history with the character and actually working on a Superman movie. I'm in a Superman movie. I don't know if people know that, but you can, if you blink, you'll miss me, but you hear my voice. We're going to talk about that, and yeah. But anyway, for those of you who don't know, our Kickstarter donors received Act 1 of True Noir, the assassination of Anton Cermak. I put together, along with Mike McDonald, a sound designer, the first 3 episodes in one long piece. But if you're a Kickstarter donor, you will also get each individual episode to download. And then also, if you're a Kickstarter donor, I keep forgetting to tell people this, but the first episode of what we call the History of the Mystery, which are these programs, or I haven't seen the first one yet, but I think it's probably around 10 minutes long, 10 to 15 minutes, and we're going to do those for each episode where writer Max Allen Collins, it's a video where he explains the actual history behind every chapter, all 10 chapters of True Noir. And those will go out to Kickstarter donors, I think, Friday, when I think that happens. And then they'll be available the following week for people that weren't Kickstarter donors. And, of course, those are pieces that are also going to be available on the Blu-rays of True Noir when I finally make them, which I will be doing after we finish the series itself. So it's very exciting. When I went on Gary Beekler's show, Nerdrotic, I want to thank everybody that's been supporting the show. You can pre-order the series right now at truenoir.com. It's not free. It's a what we call a premium audio podcast because it took a lot of money to make it. A lot more money than we have. So we're still spending money. But we're putting it out, and this weekend, the first 3 episodes will be available. You can pre-order now, obviously, and then how we're going to work it is the first 3 episodes will drop, and then we'll be putting out the History of the Mystery over the Christmas holiday and New Year's, and then the episodes 4 through 10 will follow every Friday beginning on January 10th. So episode 4 will drop January 10th, January 17th. Episode 5 will drop. And then, of course, Kickstarter donors get those episodes as digital downloads the week before. And then we'll still have the History of the Mystery going. And I can't... It warms my little heart that people have said the nicest things about the show. I mean, I've often said that, look, I talk a lot of mad shit on this channel about other people's work. The only way that I could do that is if I did work myself. And I think that True Noir, even though it's only an audio drama, I've brought everything I know about production, directing actors, editorial, producing, sound design. I've brought everything that I know to bear on True Noir, and I leave it up for you to decide whether you think it's good or not. But I have to say it was amazing to work with everybody that I've worked with. I was able to go pick all my collaborators. Christine Sheeks, my supervising producer. Mike Bodden and I, we started a new company, and this is our first venture, Imagination Connoisseurs Unlimited. We have a number of other productions in the hopper. And, of course, I've got another movie, White Devils, that I was a producer on that we have coming out. So I couldn't do this show if I also wasn't creating material that other people can criticize. I know that might be a weird thing to say, but I just feel that for me personally, as a lifelong imagination connoisseur, I have always felt that our job as people that love this stuff, I mean, not everybody, because not everybody's inclined to get into entertainment or try and make stuff. But those of us who are, like I would have this argument with Mark Altman all the time, whose documentary Greatest Christmas Movies Ever dropped on the CW. You can watch it on the CW app. I'm actually in it. I haven't watched it yet. I don't know if I was cut out. I think I'm still in it. But you can see that. It's on the CW app. But I used to say to Mark, before we made Free Enterprise, don't you think it's our obligation to, if we're so immersed in this and we're going to be critics, we have to be like Godard and Truffaut and the filmmakers that came out of Cahiers du Cinema, the great French film magazine in the 50s. They were critics that became filmmakers themselves. I always thought, well, that's kind of our destiny. We have to make entertainment sort of to give back, or to sort of, why become the professional fans that we are if we are not going to give back? And that's through the work that I've done. Look, I've never had great giant success, but I'm really proud of the career that I've had as a fan too. People know I produced DVD documentaries for 20 years, the last of which came out in 2020 for my own film, The Hills Run Red, that I produced, and with director Dave Parker. And when COVID hit, thank God, Scream Factory, because of they couldn't get another movie from Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers gave them The Hills Run Red as a consolation prize, and they called us and they said, "Do you have any material that you can add?" It was only ever released on DVD, and I had made. There was no budget to make special features, but I took my own camera to Bulgaria when we shot the movie, and when I was there for 4 months, and I shot my own stuff, my own behind the scenes, and they only gave me 30 minutes because it was a DVD, but I had 30 hours of footage that I shot, including interviews with all the cast. And when lockdown hit, Scream Factory said, "If you got anything," and I said, "Well, I have 30 hours of on-set stuff I shot in Bulgaria, and hopefully I hadn't looked at it in 12 years, and it looked great because I shot it on HDV tapes, because back then I shot it on an HDV tape that was shot with the same camera that I shot my Superman Returns documentary with. When many people know that I was embedded in the production of Superman Returns. I started working on the documentary I made in August, September of 2024, in 2004. So I started 20 years ago, and then I was still working on the Chronicles of Narnia. Our team was in New Zealand. I went from Lord of the Rings to work on Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and we were in country in New Zealand for 14 months. And then Brian, I had done X-Men 1.5, and I had done X2 during production, so I was going to Vancouver. So Brian asked me to do Superman. And he doesn't call me up. Somebody calls from Warner Brothers and says, "You're supposed to be are you doing the documentary for Superman Returns?" I'm like, "Oh, okay." And Brian said to me, he goes, "You need to be here the whole time I shoot this movie." And I'm like, I'm working on What's the Wardrobe. And he's like, "As long as you can get here in January of 2025 or 2005. So I said, yeah, I'll work it out. I have some other people that are going to work on it for me until I get there. So I was on most of 2005. I was on set almost every day for the production of Superman Returns. So, and I had complete access. I could go anywhere. I could go into the producer's office. I hung around Brian most of the time on set at Video Village. I was constantly shooting, and to see the results of that, it was kind of sad, actually. We'd hoped the movie would have performed better. There are two things about Superman Returns that I think are relevant from my perspective to this conversation. One is the original cut of Superman Returns was about a half an hour longer than the movie that was released. And I adored that version of Superman Returns. And of course, you can't work on a movie for 2 years and not love it. And a lot of people, you know, I've heard every objection to Superman Returns. I think it's being reevaluated. But the version of Superman Returns that I loved, that I saw twice in a theater, was what's called the Friends and Family cut. And it opened with the whole Return to Krypton sequence, where it opens with Superman flying over Krypton, seeing the remnants of Krypton. And there were things in that version of the movie that are not really in the film that was released. First of all, Kal Penn's character has dialogue. His entire dialogue is cut out of the movie. And Lex Luthor and he had ginned up evidence that Krypton still existed, which is why Superman left Earth in the first place. And there was just a lot more to it. It was much more of a meal. And there was a lot more character bits and a lot of stuff. Ben Hubbard, played by the late, great James Karen, who was Martha Kent's boyfriend. I mean, you see some of those deleted scenes did show up on the Blu-ray. But it was kind of a bummer that that Friends and Family cut was never seen. I hope, you know, I've talked to people over the years at Warner Brothers to see about reconstituting it, but because of Brian's travails and Kevin Spacey's travails, no one has ever had the reason, I think, to revisit it, which I think is too bad, because working on that movie was one of the most fun couple of years I had in my entire life. Being in Australia was amazing, and everybody that worked on that movie was so much fun, and I'm really proud of the documentary. The documentary would have been a lot longer, but unfortunately, at the time, Walmart sold about 50% of all of the physical media in the world back in 2005, 2006. I thought we were going to do a Lord of the Rings. I thought we would have made like a 9-hour documentary about the making of the movie. And the way I approached that documentary was I wanted everybody who was making the movie to be a character in my documentary. So the making of the movie was the structure, but all the people like Guy Hendricks Dias, the production designer, and Tom Siegel, the DP, and Brian himself, and all the actors and everybody, they were the characters in the story of the making of this movie. So that's how I was shooting it. I had my friend Todd Stanley and a few other people, Adam Robitel, who's now gone on to become a great director. He was editing the Brian's blogs that we had going up at the same time Peter Jackson's blogs about the making of King Kong happened, and that's how we did that crazy crossover. Frank Darabont visited the set, and we did a video that they wouldn't let me put up because the premise was that Frank Darabont was coming down to replace Brian as the director, which was complete bullshit. We made it up on the spot. I just thought it would be hilarious, and then I took him around, and he was very convincing. Frank Darabont's a great actor. We had to cut that down. Eventually, that appeared on a Blu-ray set of the other Superman movies, but we weren't allowed to put it up online because it was too convincing. But it was a great year, and I had incredible insight into every phase of that production, beginning with my first visit to the studio in August of 2004 to the art department, where everybody under the watchful eye of Guy Dias was designing Superman Returns. My favorite, Superman, had yet to be cast. Brian called me up one day, and I want to say it was in November. It's on the documentary. I don't remember the timeline. It was 20 years ago. In like November of 2004, Brian calls me up and he says, you got to come to the studio tomorrow. And all of my camera equipment was in New Zealand. So I had to go and rent a video camera, one of our video cameras. And he wouldn't tell me what was going on, just to come to the studio early. And so I go to the studio. I go to Warner Brothers with my camera equipment. I'm like, dude, what's going on? And there's like a 65 millimeter film camera, like someone shooting something in 65 millimeter. And I'm like, what's going on, dude? Like what's happening here? And he didn't tell me anything. And he's just, and Mike Doherty and Dan Harris were there. And I'm like, guys, what's going on? And I think Mike probably said, well, and Mike Doherty, of course, directed Krampus and Trick or Treat and Godzilla King of the Monsters. And Mike's like, well, I think we're doing the screen test. I think this is the guy. this is Superman. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah. So Brian wanted you to shoot some behind the scenes on the making of this scene when well, it turned out it was Brandon Routh, who I did not know. And what Brandon, I don't think, knew, although he kind of did, is that at this point, Brian was not testing anyone else. Yes, I have all of the Red Sun, which I couldn't show. I think I still have them all, actually. One day I should put them on YouTube. All the people that auditioned for McGee's Red Sun. I have all of that stuff. Or maybe I call it Red Sun because it was all the code name Red Sun, but I have all of those auditions for McGee's version of Superman, which we were not allowed to put in the documentary. It wasn't our movie. So anyway, it was fascinating to watch. And Brandon just wore a blue shirt with nothing on it and kind of a makeshift cape. And Kerry Russell was there reading with him as Lois Lane. And I don't know if anyone's a fan of The Diplomat, but a friend of mine, Michael Davis, who's been on this channel, who directed Shoot 'Em Up, made a movie with Kerry Russell, basically discovered Kerry Russell in a film called 8 Days a Week. It's a delightful independent movie. If you can find it, I highly recommend seeking it out. And I'd never met Kerry Russell. And the thing about Kerry Russell is she was effervescent. Like I mean, everyone knows I love the ladies, but Kerry Russell was so nice, but she has this beauty that radiates from within her. Like it was wild. It was disarming. Like I saw Felicity, I too thought she shouldn't have cut her hair, but meeting her in person, she was an absolute delight. And unfortunately, like no one ever told me that she was in the running for Lois Lane. I don't know if she was doing a favor. I don't know what the deal was. I don't know if it was a chemistry test. All I can tell you is that Kerry Russell was an absolute delight. So during this time, I watched Brandon pick out the glasses, the horn-rimmed glasses. Louise Mingenbach, the costume designer, was there. And they shot that screen test in 65 millimeter. And it wasn't like, it was in a soundstage. And it's amazing, and you do see some of this stuff in my documentary. You can also find this material. There's been many people who have taken my documentary, our documentary, and put it on YouTube. So you can find a lot of this footage. All of it was from our stuff. All of it's stuff that either I shot, Todd Stanley shot, or Adam Robitel shot. It was just the three of us. And most of it was me. And so it was incredible. It was incredible to be at ground zero at the moment, and you could tell. They did the scene where Superman and Lois are on the rooftop underneath the globe, the Daily Planet globe. And you could, it was clear that Brandon Routh was the guy, and it's funny because Dan Harris says, I think this is the guy. And it was wild, man. It was absolutely wild to be there and watch when you saw film history happening, because Brian shot it in 65 millimeter because he had to convince the studio to let Brandon Routh start a $200 million movie who'd done very little. He wanted to get basically an unknown. And then, of course, I went down and shot behind the scenes for, we only had the budget to shoot until the end of principal photography. That was kind of the thing. Post-production, I didn't get into in the documentary. It was just to cover the entire principal, which was amazing. And it was one of the most fun times in my entire life. I got to go to Tamworth, Australia, Australia's country music capital. I think anybody I got to work with the great David James, one of the greatest still photographers who's ever worked in Hollywood. I can't tell you, it was so much fun. And Kate Bosworth was sweet as can be. She even gave me a parting gift, a Superman necklace. I loved her. Kevin Spacey was hilarious. We got crocked at a Mexican restaurant, and we were all sitting in the back seat, and he was drunk, and there was like 3 of us in the back seat, 4 of us in the back seat, and we had him on our laps, and he was singing Bobby Darin songs. It was an incredible time, and I wish the movie was better received. I think it has been reassessed, reevaluated, but I really wish that the friends and family cut of Superman Returns could be resurrected, because I think people would really like it. And I think it would go really well on Max. And it's there. I'm sure it's not hard to reconstitute it, because I think pretty much all the effects were finished. It even had a different opening title sequence with the Daily Planet that was really, really cool. Although I use that for my documentary. I don't know if that was ever completed. And it also, it had the curtains opening like the original Dawn of Superman did. Anyway, I play a NASA reporter when Clark and Jimmy Olsen are in the bar. You can see me on the screen for literally half a second, but you hear my voice. I'm reporting on the shuttle disaster. So I have multiple credits in the end credits. I think I get an EPK photographer or EPK producer, and I think I'm called NASA reporter, but on screen my character's name is Ross Campbell. So it was amazing, but it was very interesting to be there to watch a Superman movie get made. That's my point, is that I think I have a unique insight into how a Superman movie is made, because I got to walk up and talk to every single person on set whenever I wanted to about whatever they were doing, whether it was scenic painters, whether it was the costumers, whether it was the camera crew. I mean, every department I could talk to, no matter what. I had complete carte blanche to talk to anybody at any time. And it's interesting because they don't do that really anymore. And the reason that was allowed to happen, and it will never happen again, I don't think, is that was very director driven. That was something that Brian wanted. Charlie de Lauzirika, my good friend Charlie, would do that with Ridley Scott when he was doing Ridley Scott's documentaries. And Laurent Bozereau has done that on Spielberg stuff. And there was a few of us. My good friend Cliff Stevenson has just done that on the new Michael Jackson biopic that Antoine Fuqua was directing. He did an amazing documentary on Saw, the last Saw movie. But it's kind of a dying art because nobody wants to pay for that because it was really expensive. But it was a great time to be alive. So to be embedded in movies like Chronicles of Narnia and to go down and work on the extended version of Lord of the Rings, X-Men 2, I wasn't really embedded there, but I was going back and forth a lot. That was a lot of fun. So it was great. But the one thing that I learned about Superman movies, Superman movie making, at the grandest scale possible, is how much thought is put into every aspect of the movie. No, now, you might disagree as the audience with the thought process that went into the movie. But I assure you that there's a reason. I mean, as you all know, there was a burnished Art Deco quality to Superman Returns. Everything from the design of the interior of the Daily Planet to exteriors to the color of things. It was the first film to shoot on the Panavision Genesis cameras. We actually had the serial numbers like 001, 002, 003. We were the first people to use those cameras, so it was shot digitally, so it had a really interesting quality to it. Those muted colors and all of that, the color palette of that movie was very intentional. And a lot of people, it's interesting to me, a lot of people, at the time, it might not have been their favorite thing, but it was harking back to the 40s, which is where we saw, the very first time we ever saw Superman on screen in movie theaters was in 1948. And I thought I would bring that up. In 1948, Kirk Alyn became the first Superman to appear on the big screen. And there he is. This is Kirk Alyn. And here was the very first Superman in a Superman serial, a weekly serial. And this was the first time the Man of Steel graced our screens. Now, I grew up with this. I mean, obviously, I saw it on TV, and I also saw it on home video when I got it. But this was the first Superman. This was not the first Superman I saw, because I wasn't able to see this until the home video era. But my first Superman, and I've loved the character since I was a little kid, but my first experience with Superman was The Adventures of Superman, the 50s TV show that starred George Reeves. Not Reeve, but George Reeves. People say Christopher Reeves, but it's Christopher Reeve. But it was George Reeves, who played the first Superman on television. And this was him. And here he is with Lois. And I was a huge, huge fan of this show when I was a little kid. I loved it. Now, George Reeves did not play Clark Kent as the kind of, Lois the bumbling Kent. He wasn't like, oh. He was a badass. You know, he was a baller. Look at my hair. What's going on over here with this? He was a baller. And he was like, he loved being Superman. He would scoop Lois. And he was not the bumbling Superman. He truly was, he was the man. But as you can see, he's a handsome guy, but he looks different, very different than how we imagine Superman to look today. But when I was a child, this was my first Superman. And then I saw Kirk Alyn later. I actually probably saw Kirk Alyn after I saw Christopher Reeve, to be honest. But then, of course, when I was 11 years old in 1978, Superman the movie came out. And it was almost as mind-blowing as Star Wars was. It's hard to, as a kid that was growing up on Super Friends cartoons, the first Super Friends cartoon with Wendy and Marvin, the hour-long ones that Warner Archive just put out on disc. To go see Superman the movie, everyone knows what a mind-blowing experience it actually was. You'll believe a man can fly. That's where I got the word verisimilitude from. But it was amazing. I don't have to tell you how amazing Superman the movie was. But if you were a child of the 1970s or an adult, it was amazing to see Superman the movie in the theater. Even Brian talks about it in the beginning of my documentary. He says sitting in the theater in Princeton, New Jersey with his mom, and as he says, seeing the credits, dun, 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 dun. No one had ever seen anything like that. And to have watched that movie at the time, it was amazing. And in 1981, I went to a special benefit screening of Superman 2. Superman 2 came out in Australia, I think, in 1980, but it came out in the United States in 1981. The three villains from Krypton descend to Earth to confront the Man of Steel in a cosmic battle, world supremacy. That's what it said. That was the ad line. I had the Superman 2 one sheet in my bedroom. I had lots of one sheets in my bedroom, movie posters, actual theatrical movie posters, and that was one of my favorites, the Superman 2 poster where he's flying at the three villains from Krypton, which was great. And then, of course, there was Superman 3 and Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. So the Superman movies, I always thought of Superman, in my mind, Superman 3 is like Jaws 3D, and Superman 4 is Jaws the Revenge of Superman movies. But you still had Christopher Reeve, and there's still things that are charming about those movies that I enjoy. Then, of course, as I was also growing up, what happened after that? Well, in the late 80s, we got the Superboy TV series. There were two Superboys after the first year. The first Superboy, let me see if I've got the right one. Yes, here was TV's. This was from 1988, and this was our first Superboy, and it was this show. This was actually made by the Salkinds, produced by the Salkinds, and who produced Superman, obviously. And it was really interesting because Superboy changed Superboys after the first season. And this is actually not Gerard Christopher. Looking at the first, as I'm looking at that, the first Superboy was not Gerard Christopher. And I'm trying to find you. Why am I drawing a blank on his name? I shouldn't be forgetting. John Newton was it, but he had actually two names. John Newton was the first, or I guess he only goes by John Newton now. But this was the first Superboy, and he wanted more money after the first season, and the Salkinds, who were notoriously cheap, got rid of him. Unfortunately, they jettisoned him because I liked the way he looked, and then he was replaced in season 2 with. By the way, here he is with his Lois, and he was replaced by Gerard Christopher, who did almost 80 episodes of the show. So and this show ran for 4 years. It went from 88 to 92. And So here you go. Now I want everybody to take a close look. So you've got here's the Superman. Here's George Reeves in 1950, in the 50s. Then you have Christopher Reeve in the 70s, and then you have, the Superboys, your two Superboys in. Well, this was in. So we went from 88 to 92, and then in 93 we got another Superman. We got Dean Cain in The Adventures of Lois and Clark. And Dean Cain, I thought, was a great choice. And this is more of a romantic Superman. It was more of it harked back again, more to the 40s and 50s, kind of a romantic Superman. And then, of course, after that, Superman Returns came out. So this show ran into the mid-90s. And then 10 years later, we got Brandon Routh as Superman in Superman Returns, which I thought he was a terrific Superman, very majestic, and no one worked harder than he did bringing this off. And then, of course, in the early teens, 2011 onward, we have the majestic Henry Cavill as Superman in more than 3 movies now, but obviously he debuted in Man of Steel, and it was the debut film in the DC universe. And I don't know why, but for whatever reason, people forget I was a huge proponent of Man of Steel. I always loved Man of Steel. I thought Zack Snyder did a great job. I've been a staunch defender. It's so funny to me that I've been defending Man of Steel and Superman's conduct in Man of Steel, and a lot of the people that would come after me, like, Superman kills in that movie. Yeah, right, because this is the real world. The real world. And what do you do when you have a superior force that is bent on the extinction of all of humankind, and you've been Superman for a week? I mean, I've had these arguments. I've heard them all. I don't want to trigger anybody, but I really enjoyed Man of Steel both as a superhero movie and as a first contact science fiction story. Really love the depiction of Krypton. I love the depiction of Krypton in Superman the movie, but I did love the depiction of Krypton in Man of Steel. I mean, I love the fact that it looked like a 70s prog rock album cover, which seemed very fitting. And I loved Russell Crowe as Jor-El. Oh, you know who I missed? I can't believe I missed this. I missed Tom Welling. Tom Welling. Actually, between Lois and Clark, I apologize profusely, between Lois and Clark. So we went from Dean Cain to Tom Welling. I can't believe I missed Tom Welling. I just mislabeled these pictures. I apologize. But Tom Welling, we didn't see much of him in the suit, but I thought, Smallville ran for 11 seasons, and so that ran starting in 2001. So Smallville was cooking when Superman Returns came out. So there were 2 Supermans. So that was amazing. And then we went, of course, to Brandon Routh, and then we went to Henry Cavill. And then, of course, we got Tyler Hoechlin here, and I thought Tyler he did great. I loved him as Superman when he wasn't a jobber, as John Campea would say, but when he finally got his own show, it just ended. I love the end of the show. I love this show. I thought the 4 seasons of the show were great, and then I can't forget that during this time we also had during the Arrowverse, we had Brandon Routh come back as the Kingdom Come Superman. So pretty cool. And then we even had Tyler in a Max Fleischer-inspired classic Superman. And then, of course, we just saw the end of the most recent Superman. And so there you go. There's like a quick history. Sorry, I put Smallville in the wrong place, but that's sort of a quick history of Superman on film. There you go. So there you go. You've had a brief look at where we're at. But let me tell you why I am crazy excited. Now, before I can already hear people going, "You're a shill." Look, if a studio wanted to pay me to shill for them, I would do it. I would probably funnel that money into my projects, but they don't do that. I mean, before you scream Grace Randolph at me, they don't do that. No studio has ever asked me for anything in terms of, even the studios that send me physical media, they don't ask me to give certain reviews. No studio, since I've been online for almost 10 years now, no one has ever called me and asked me to give anything a good review, including Picard Season 3. I've never been asked to do that, and I don't make any money. I am not part of the Access Media. I'm on no one's press lists. I used to go to screenings all the time, and I wasn't on YouTube. I went to way more screenings in the 90s and the 2000s than I ever went to now, and I've been on YouTube for 10 years just because I'm over it, And plus, I live further away. But no, I'm not shilling for anybody. I am a lifelong fan and imagination connoisseur. I've been an imagination connoisseur since I was a little kid. My opinions are my own, and I'm not bought and paid for. And if I was, I would tell you, because I'd be damn proud of it. If some studio wanted to give me money to shill for them, bring it on. It just doesn't happen, at least not to me. So anyway, why am I deliriously excited about James Gunn's Superman? Why, amidst all the people complaining about the costumes, which, by the way, since I've been a fan, every time a new superhero iteration has come out, especially DC, people have bitched and moaned and complained. It was very interesting when Michael Keaton was first announced as Batman. There was a monster outcry. The first BBS boards were lit up. What? Mr. Mom, as Max Allen Collins said to me today, Mr. Mom is going to be Batman? I mean, nobody understood where Tim Burton was coming from. People could not believe. And remember, other than animation, Batman really hadn't been seen on screen since Burt Ward and Adam West. So there wasn't like a 70s, I mean, I know, Challenge of the Justice League or Challenge of the Superheroes and all that, but that was them. Anyway, they came back. But the bitching, moaning, complaining. People love the fact Jack Nicholson was playing the Joker, but people were incensed about Michael Keaton playing Batman. I mean, Heath Ledger, nobody wanted Heath Ledger to be the Joker. Can you imagine anyone else? I mean, and so there's always been people, before something has come out, bitching and moaning and complaining, especially in the superhero space. I don't think people complained about Robert Downey Jr., though. But anyway, I'm sure maybe somebody did. But here's why I'm deliriously excited about James Gunn's Superman and why I think it's going to be a game changer. Here's a number of reasons. Number one, the number one reason why I'm excited about James Gunn's Superman is he is an auteur. He wrote the script himself, and he is directing it. Now, people could look at the movies that James Gunn himself has made. People have to understand that James Gunn comes out of the trauma school of that's where he started to cut his teeth. People that gave us the Toxic Avenger. Now, you have to understand that New York exploitation sense of humor. James Gunn has that in spades. So a lot of people that see pictures of him having a party in bad taste have to understand where a lot of that comes from. Now, if you are a fan of New York, and I always talk about this, the grungy New York exploitation of Abel Ferrara's Driller Killer, or give me Basket Case, Frank Henlotter's Basket Case, or Frankenhooker, or give me, the epitome, I was talking about this last night, The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, the original, with Robert Mathau's hangdog face, and even though that movie's more heroic, everything in that movie looks like it needs to be washed down with bleach. I loved coming out of that era. And I still, to this day, I go back and I watch movies set in 1970s New York. I love them. All the blaxploitation movies set in New York. I mean, whether it was Superfly or Shaft, Slaughter, give me that grungy. I loved it. I loved that grungy New York. I don't know, call it a patina. That's where James Gunn sort of comes out of that tradition. And so you have to understand, and if you really are interested in something that not a lot of people remember, James Gunn wrote a novel. He wrote a novel that I forgot to bring down. I would hold it up. It's right up there. I have a great first edition hardcover called The Toy Collector that actually has Robbie the Robot on the cover, which is a dark fucking book. So James Gunn has a dark sensibility. He has a dark, sardonic sensibility. But at the same time, the man has heart. Now, you can't look at a movie like Slither. Slither and Super give you inklings of where he was going with Guardians of the Galaxy and Suicide Squad. So you can see that in Super and Slither. But he brought this sensibility. Now, here's you got to go with me on this. The Guardians of the Galaxy movies worked for two reasons. Because, and I know people are going to say, well, he didn't write the original script. Look, man, I don't want to argue with the WGA. I don't want to have these arguments. Hollywood works in mysterious ways. But if you go through arbitration, for the most part, people always can bitch and moan and complain. But James Gunn, Guardians of the Galaxy, represents James Gunn's real sensibility. And I don't want, people can argue with me all they want about it, but it did go through the normal channels. And James Gunn brought heart to what could have been a heartless, futile exercise. And it might not have worked had we not had James Gunn's sensibility. And Kevin Feige saw something in Slither and Super, both of those films. Now, another reason, that's the number one reason, is he is an auteur. Now, I will say this. I had an experience. I was an associate. I was made an associate producer after the fact. But I was a producer on a movie that James Gunn wrote. A lot of people don't know this. But it was about the world's 7th greatest superhero team. It was a low-budget film that we produced. My company, Mindfire Entertainment, produced, that I founded right after we made Free Enterprise. And we made this in 1999. It was directed by Craig Mazin, who co-created the Last of Us TV series with Neil Druckmann. It was the first thing he ever directed. And James Gunn wrote it. And James Gunn is in it. And he plays a character named Minute Man. Everyone calls him Minute Man, but he says it's Minute Man. Sean Gunn is also in that. Thomas Hayden Church is in that. Judy Greer is in that. Paget Brewster is in that movie. We made it for very little money. Craig Mazin directed it. If you've never seen the specials, I think it's funny. But again, James Gunn's sensibility, you've got that sort of dark and off-color and certainly not politically correct humor, but mixed with heart. Now, the thing about I've worked with the man. I've seen him work. I know what kind of sensibility James Gunn brings to the table. And the rest of his work bears it out. But I do think this. James Gunn's also a huge fan, if you've seen him talk about like 80s DC. I think that what James Gunn knows, he's not going to make this Suicide Squad or Peacemaker or even Guardians of the Galaxy or Slither or Super. I think, with what little insight I have into this, because I really don't know, I've not read the script, I think we're going to get a cross between Fleischer's Superman, a Norman Rockwell America, a Tomorrowland City of the Future Metropolis that deals with a fantastical world that's not our world. I always scream about verisimilitude, but a fantastical world can have verisimilitude too. You just have to establish that world. The world of Fleischer's Superman with magnetic monsters and all kinds of things, super science, and the fact that superheroes have been around for a long time. And I would imagine, since they're going to talk about things like the Authority, there's bad superheroes. There's good superheroes. There's wondrous superheroes. There are gods amongst us, whether it's Wonder Woman or others. And I think that we're going to see a fantastical Superman, the likes of which we've never seen before. One of the things, obviously, the Superman movies that we've seen, unlike the Fleischer cartoons that had that sort of 40s quality, Kirk Allen's Superman, George Reeves' Superman, Christopher Reeve, his Superman, the two Superboys, all the way up through all the Superman. I mean, I would say that the Arrowverse Superman kind of did more with alternate universes and different things. We had Luthor's suit and all that, more like what the animated series did, or Justice League Unlimited. I think we're going to get a live action. We're not going to get a live action version that's trying to convince us we're in the real world. It's not going to be Superman. I mean, sure, it's shot on real locations, but I don't think those real locations are supposed to be New York City. I think we're going to see a different kind of a metropolis. And I think that we're going to see, and I could be wrong, but I'm willing to take my chips and go all in on this Superman movie. This Superman movie is not going to be the tone of it. That image they released of Krypto and Superman overlooking the Earth, that's the kind of movie that we're going to get. And if you can, maybe that was from the Justice League satellite. I don't know. I have no idea. Could have been. But James Gunn's also a huge fan of DC Comics, especially. I was the comic renaissance of the 80s, where you saw John Byrne come in and start Superman at issue 1 after his Man of Steel miniseries. Or you had Jam DeMatteis, I always mispronounce his name, even though I know him, he's a nice guy, and Keith Giffen's Justice League International. You know, I mean, you think about what was going on with comic books in the 80s. You could read a serious Batman comic and then at the same time read or look at Jim Apato's great art in Batman and the Outsiders when they were fighting the nuclear family. Goofiness combined with seriousness. And that was what I thought was so much fun about comics. You could read The Dark Knight Returns, you could read Watchmen, you could read Crisis on Infinite Earths, and then you could mosey on over to Justice League International and laugh your ass off. And it all kind of worked together. Now, I'm not saying that that's an easy thing to do. The tone of it is going to be extremely difficult to keep correct, I think. Woo, I love that. It's going to be very hard. But I think James Gunn did it because he did it at the script phase. And the studio knew. No Superman has had a writer-director at the helm. The scripts were written by someone else, and then the director came in and directed the scripts. Not in this case. It's an auteurist vision of Superman. So we are going to get a clear-headed vision from the ground up, the likes of which we had never been given before. That is another reason why I have every faith that James Gunn is going to deliver us a banger. He's going to give us a banger because it is an auteurist vision. It's his vision, from the page to what we see on the screen. Never been done before, at least not on the big screen. So that to me is exciting. I mean, you could say that Bryan Singer did come up with like the story for Superman Returns, but it was Mike and Dan. I mean, Bryan did work with them on the script in the room. You can see it in my documentary. But with James Gunn, he came up with the idea, he wrote the idea, he executed the idea. And then another reason why I think it's going to be great is if James Gunn fails at delivering a transcendent Superman movie, the entire DC studios, in my estimation, I mean, he's already, the last DC movies, they'll call them the lame duck DC movies. And yes, people, I liked The Flash. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I freely admit it. I loved it when I saw it at CinemaCon. I still love it. I own the Blu-ray. Cry Me a River. I like that movie. I think it's a lot of fun because it brought in a lot of that thing. As you can see, I'm surrounded by comic book omnibuses. I have tens of thousands of pages of comic books in this room. I am a huge comic nerd. Not as much as some people, but I'm a big nerd and or imagination connoisseur. And I think that look, I'm always out there preaching verisimilitude. I liked Zack Snyder's Superman. I liked the operatic, Wagnerian nature of what he was presenting us. I mean, as I said, Zack Snyder's Justice League was fucking metal. And it was. It was so metal. Now, and look, another thing. Did I ever think that Zack Snyder's Justice League was going to happen? No. Why did I not think it was ever going to happen? Because the only way it was, and as I said, it wasn't ready to go. As Zack Snyder himself has said, he had a black and white version of it on his computer. But I said there were tens of millions of dollars of effects that would have to be finished to finish that movie. And I said there was no one who would pay for it. So I said it was never, I'm going to go on record as saying this. I said it was never going to happen unless somebody could pay for it. However, like with a lot of things, you can't hold people to what they said when things change. Because what happened was HBO Max, when you had the AT&T merger, then you had the Warner Brothers Discovery merger. But when the merger happened, the first merger happened, suddenly, and they're starting a new streaming service, suddenly there was a reason and there was a money stream that was turned on, and they need programming for their new streaming service. So then, as we said on the John Campea show, I came out very early before it was announced that it was going to happen. I said, you know what? The Snyder cut of Justice League might very well happen because now there's money to pay for it, because you need a revenue stream to pay for those things, and you also have to have a way to pay it back. It's not just having the money to make something. You have to have a revenue stream to justify the expense to hopefully get it back. Well, what better way to get people to sign up for your new streaming service than have something like Zack Snyder's Justice League? So suddenly, when I suddenly came on board, people were like, oh, Rob, see, we told you. No, you didn't tell me, because you were all, everybody that says we knew it all the time, you didn't know it all the time, because you don't understand how the industry works. There was nobody to pay for it. However, I would say this: the slavish devotion of all the Snyder fans, and who have been great. You know, I've streamed with a lot of them. I have nothing against the Snyder fans, the Snyder cult, as they're called now. I have no problems with them, and it was their devotion and everything they did that alerted the studio that they should do it. If there was no Snyder Cut movement, it never would have happened. The Snyder Cut movement told the studio that, you know what? Now that we're doing a new streaming service, they could have made anything for that streaming service. The devotion of the Snyder Cut fans convinced them to do it. And everything that Zack Snyder behind the scenes, he had the leverage of those fans. If that fan base didn't exist, if they didn't do what they were going to do, we might not have got Zack Snyder's Justice League. And for the record, Joss Whedon's cut of Justice League is one of the most disappointing. Behind Return of the Jedi, it might be the second most disappointing film-going experience I've had in my life. I was crushed when I saw that movie, and I loved Zack Snyder's Justice League. Do I think it was perfect? No. But I love it because it gave me, the Justice League was my team when I was a kid. I loved the Justice League, I loved the Teen Titans, and I loved the X-Men. And to a certain extent, I loved Legion of Superheroes and Avengers as well. But X-Men and Teen Titans were my favorite. And then Justice League takes me back to childhood. I collected early Justice League comics. It was my first comic I collected, so I love the Justice League. And seeing Zack Snyder's Justice League was the way that I thought of the Justice League as being in my head when I was a kid. So I was happy to see Zack Snyder's Justice League. However, let's be honest. Can we be honest? It's kind of like when Richard Harris, as Marcus Aurelius, wanted to speak with Maximus. Let's talk, you and I. Let's speak of Rome. It's but a whisper. You know, we don't have to talk like that because we're online. But think about it. Think I'm Maximus and you're Marcus Aurelius, or I'm Marcus Aurelius and you're Maximus and you're listening to me. Zack Snyder's version of those superheroes were antithetical to how those heroes were originally conceived. Not enough people liked what Zack Snyder did. I know. People, are you throwing stuff at the screen at me now? Those movies underperformed. Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice underperformed. Why? Because it was overstuffed. It wasn't perfect. And I would say that Zack Snyder was interfered with. The part of the problem was, and I'll say it right away, I love Man of Steel. But that was a movie without joy. It was also a movie that was rather bleak. And when I tell you that one of my favorite things in any superhero movie ever is the opening of Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, when Bruce Wayne lands and they replay the end of Man of Steel and you're seeing, I love this to see the battle of Superman and Zod over Metropolis. I love to see the 9/11-esque carnage, the Akira-like carnage in Metropolis, because that's what really would happen. And you know when you're a kid, you dream of that kind of stuff, but the problem is the people that are detractors from those movies understand that those movies are relentlessly downbeat. They are not joyful. And they are inherently, and even down to the color palette. So what you've done is you've drained out the DNA. Zack Snyder drained it out. Now, he gave us something that was, again, the heavy metal version of what these characters are. I mean, I think Wonder Woman's theme, especially when Tina Guo was just railing on her electric cello, is one of the coolest things ever. Who doesn't think that's cool? You know, I mean, that's fucking metal. Fucking metal. I didn't want to flip you off there. Sorry about that. But I've been saying that. We started Midnight Metal because of Zack Snyder's Justice League. When I started to see those trailers come out, I'm like, oh my God. You know, it looked like van paintings from the 70s. Like I said, prog rock paintings from the 70s. And I loved it, but it wasn't for everybody. And it's certainly not for kids. It wasn't. It wasn't for families. A Superman movie, just like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, the Marvel Cinematic Universe made a movie about the entire, half the universe being exterminated in the snap of a finger, and it's still pretty much for all audiences. No one's in bed, you don't see boobies, you know, there's not a lot of blood going on, but there's enough superhero violence that, you know, go for the head. Thanos' head gets chopped off, but because he's purple, he's essentially Space Grimace. Kids can still stomach it, maybe. If I was 5 years old, to be honest, I'm a different kind of a kid, so maybe I would have loved it. But you can't say that Zack Snyder's, his vision for the DC universe was palatable to most people. It was not a 4-quadrant. I mean, come on. Little Luthor leaves a mason jar of piss on Holly Hunter's desk at a congressional hearing before he blows up part of the Capitol. I mean, my God, it went to places that you're never going to see in any other vision of Superman. I mean, and you could say, well, Rob, you know, Lex Luthor used 2 nukes and would have destroyed all of California and killed millions of people. That's true. But it's the tone of which, it's the tone of how he had Miss Tessmacher and Otis with him. And so the tone of it was never as relentlessly downbeat or as heavy metal. Just like, you know, it's the difference, I'll tell you. It's the difference between my first rock concert was seeing Kiss. I saw the Kiss Dynasty tour. But that would have been different than going to see a Slayer concert. You know, I was in junior high school. I was in 7th grade. I was 12 years old. Kiss was my first rock and roll concert. They still were wearing their makeup. By the way, the concert was awesome. I went with Pam Comstock, rest in peace, and Jeff Swafford. But at 12, I wouldn't have enjoyed seeing a Slayer concert or seeing Gigi Allen for that matter. It all has to do with tone. And the real problem, I understand that there are people that are... Look, I love Henry Cavill as the Man of Steel. He was great. I liked his costume. You know, I liked the way he looked. He was a terrific Superman. You know what he never got? He never got to be in a great Superman movie. He didn't. And as much as you can argue about it all you want, I like Zack Snyder's 3. Call it the Justice League trilogy, call it the Superman trilogy, but I like Man of Steel. I like Batman v Superman, the Ultimate Edition of Dawn of Justice, and I like Zack Snyder's Justice League. That in itself, to me, is a triumph of his particular vision. Unfortunately, it was not a populist vision of Superman, which is why he's never going to come back and do that again. It didn't work. And people can say, well, Rob, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, it almost made $900 million at the box office. It was one of the most expensive superhero movies ever made, and it wasn't the Avengers. Somebody said told me it cost $450 million. The studio thought it was going to make a lot more money. Now, I would say that the studio, if they had left it alone and put out the problem with Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, there's so much in it, like the whole dream, the nightmare sequences with Darkseid and all that. People don't know what that is. You know, and they're watching this going, what? And again, the tone of Superman coming down and going after Batman and going after the remaining Justice League, this is relentlessly downbeat. This is not what people wanted from their superhero movies, at least not with the general public. Hey, we love it. I understand there's a lot of people that love it and think it's the greatest thing in the world, but you also have to bring to bear critical acumen and understand what does the marketplace want? You know, what is the marketplace going to bear? It ain't show friends. It's show business. And if those movies aren't doing the kind of business, Batman v Superman should have been a movie that young kids were going to with their grandparents. Then it would have been a $2 million or $2 billion movie. It would have done Force Awakens numbers. But you had to have Doomsday in it. You had to kill Superman at the end of that movie. That movie is not a crowd-pleasing, wonderful time that sends you smiling. You need... Here's what a Superman movie should be. Here's another key, and this is what I think James Gunn is going to do with Superman. You got to go with me on this. Because I don't mean it literally has to be this way. I mean the way it makes you feel. I'm going to take two movies, two disparate movies, and you're probably going to say to yourself, huh? James Gunn's Superman is going to be tonally, and I don't know anything about this movie, but I'm going to take two great tastes that taste great together. I'm going to take two movies, and you got to think tone, okay? Not that it's fantastic. And here are the two movies, Back to the Future and Field of Dreams. You take those two movies. Field of Dreams takes place in a world we believe, but that movie is fantastical. They're going back in time in that movie. That, you know, if you build it, you don't even know there's some voice out. There's some crazy, fantastical shit that happens in Field of Dreams that you buy into. Why? Because the tone is right. That movie is one of the greatest examples of the fantastic ever put on film. The fact that movie works, and by the end, it's emotionally slaying, especially for dudes. Dad, you want to have a catch? And Back to the Future, the tone of that, I mean, Marty McFly is trying to stop from being wiped from existence, but every moment of that movie is wildly entertaining. It's all about tone. It's all about tone. And we've never got a Superman movie in the modern day, not since the original 1978. I'm not saying there hasn't been stuff. I mean, some of the animated shows are great, but on the big screen, even Superman Returns, you've got the great air. The reason that people love the airplane rescue scene, not only is it great and badass, but it's joyful. It's fun. The tone of it almost careens into being too serious, but it isn't. It's bad fucking ass. And it's, by the end of it, you're clapping along with everybody in the stadium. That's the tone that we haven't get. We didn't get that. Zack Snyder's Superman was completely bereft of that. Everything was relentlessly, it was fucking, because it was fucking metal. And it was not the tone of what we needed it to be. I mean, I liked it, and so did a lot of people. But not for Superman. Superman needs to be a 4-quadrant movie that has the joyful, fantastical, and emotional component of Back to the Future and Field of Dreams. If you could mix those together, that's what James Gunn's Superman is going to be. At least I think so. I also think it has to be like that. Now, people are going to say, you have to understand, I am not saying that it's going to have any kind of elements like either one of those movies. I don't think maybe dead people come back to life. I don't know. Maybe they build in Smallville, they build a baseball stadium. What I'm talking about is tone and the ability of the movie, the fantastical world that James Gunn is going to present to us, the way that superheroes exist, is going to be effortless. Why? Because it has to. You're going to have Green Lanterns, and you're going to have Mr. Terrific, and you're going to have a member of the Authority, but it's going to work the same way that in Field of Dreams is relentlessly down to earth, but you completely buy into these fantastical elements. Suddenly you're back in time talking to dead Burt Lancaster. And then they pick up, Archie Graham in a van driving back to Iowa. I mean, if you look at those, and Back to the Future from the very beginning, when Marty McFly walks in at the beginning of Back to the Future, the opening, if you remember Back to the Future, the camera is panning over all these clocks. And you see Einstein's bowl, his dog bowl. And once again, one of his his cans are being opened, and clearly haven't been there. There's a big pile of dog food. And then Marty McFly goes in and plugs in his guitar into a ridiculously large speaker. And then he strums it and gets blown Maxell tape style back through a wall, or into the wall. That is playing with all different kinds of tones. At first, it's like, ooh, I get it, it's time, all these timepieces. But then you see the dog food bowl. And Robert Zemeckis is brilliant, and Bob Gale's script was brilliant in establishing a tone. Everything is paid off. That movie's, from a writing standpoint, is a perfect movie. And some people go, well, what is it? Now we have all the revisionist people going, well, so what is it? He has to go change his life and make his parents, he has to be rich to be happy? Fuck all that. Give me a break. You don't even with your postmodern leftist bullshit. And I'm a leftist, but I hate that. I hate the people going back and this is problematic today. No, if you're telling somebody that something is problematic today that was made in 1985, you're problematic. And I don't want to go to parties with you because they're no fun. You know what? You're the kind of person I can't go in the back room with and do a few bumps and get loaded and have a great conversation until 5 a.m. I don't do that anymore. I haven't taken drugs in 20 years. But hey, you know what I'm saying? You're that kind of person. I want to hear it. I want you to try and understand what I'm saying about Back to the Future and Field of Dreams. And those things, because when you're making a superhero movie, you have to have both verisimilitude and you have to have a sense of awe and wonder. That's what you need. Superman, the movie, gave us that. Don't look, just fly. Air Force One. Or when the cat burglar is coming up the side of the easiest effect in the world. Tip the camera, and there was Christopher Reeve standing right there. So what if his cape's dribbling down a little bit? It was that's what we got. We got awe and wonder. That's what James Gunn's going to bring us. Now, you know what? What's great about me saying this is I could be completely full of shit and I could be totally off base. I have no idea. But the great thing is we'll all know on Thursday and you can come back and say I was full of shit. But I'm going all in. If I had chips in front of me, I'm going all in on this. And that's why I think we should be excited. Because one, the entire DC studios and James Gunn's future at the studio. Do you think he wants to lose his job? All the Gods and Monsters plans, everything that he wants to do, whether it's an Authority movie or Clayface or whatever, Swamp Thing by James Mangold, whatever they're going to do, I don't know. But it's all resting on Superman. If Superman crashes and burns, they'll do in one movie what Sony's done to the Spider-Verse in 3 movies. Because it's much more expensive. There's so much riding on this. And also, there's Peacemaker coming. But I trust in Gunn. And I've got some articles I want to read about this as well. But I wanted to set that up. And a lot of people, hey, you might not buy it. You might not buy it. But we're going to find out soon enough. And I could have egg on my face or a number of things. You never know. But I think I've laid it out. This is it's all pure speculation. And you know what? Most of all, fun. Isn't that fun where we can speculate on this stuff? I think it is. So let's see what you guys have to say. I want to see if anyone's firing anything here. Let's see what we got. Sheriff Carl. Wow, we got a lot of people are sending stuff in here. Wow, this is crazy. Let's go back. Wow, there's a lot of people have things to say. Garrett Groover says, you can have either Manhunter, Last of the Mohicans, or The Insider in 4K. Which one do you pick and why? Well, I think Last of the Mohicans would benefit the most because of the cinematography. But I love both The Insider and Manhunter. But I would go first with Last of the Mohicans. And I like the cuts. And I want to remix in Dolby Atmos because I love that. I love that score, too. By the way, here is a tip I got from Russell that I didn't ever answer. He asks, Rob, I'm curious to know your thoughts on Jerome Bixby's The Man from Earth. Discovered it a few years ago, and it's one of my top 3 films. In honor of Tony Todd, who we recently lost, it was fitting to revisit some of his work. I love the show. Well, Russell, I love The Man from Earth. Jerome Bixby, who you might know, wrote the Star Trek episode Mirror Mirror. He also wrote the Twilight Zone episode It's a Good Life. You're a bad man. You're a very bad man. And The Man from Earth is it's a wonderful, it's a low budget science fiction film, but I highly recommend seeking it out. And do me a favor. It's one of those movies. It's better if you go in cold. Don't read anything about it. But Russell, good call on Man from Earth. I have the Blu-ray of Man from Earth. So it's really, really great. And Garrett Groover asked another question. From your perspective, why is Sony's superhero universe failing? Is it a lack of Spider-Man or is it something deeper? Okay, again, I've said this, I've talked about this a lot. I talked a lot about on Versus. The problem with, here's the biggest problem with all IP that we love. IP was originally driven by the creatives. Star Wars, George Lucas had a vision. He couldn't get the rights to Flash Gordon, so he wanted to do a space fantasy. He got his great collaborators, Gary Kurtz, Marcia, his wife, and Paul Hirsch and Richard Chew to edit. He created ILM was born, the Dijkstraflex camera. All this stuff came together by these creative people, and you had one guy at 20th Century Fox, Alan Ladd, who, think about it. George Lucas made American Graffiti for less than $1 million. It made $150 million for Universal. And even Universal said, yeah, George, we don't want to make your space fantasy. And for good reason. Back in, the mid-'70s, who thought something like that would work? It was all dystopian sci-fi. That's when we got Zardoz and Rollerball and The Ultimate Warrior and Omega Man. And anyway, no one was going to make what George Lucas wanted to make at Universal, even though he just made them. American Graffiti was one of the most profitable independent movies of all time. And they still didn't let him do it. It was one guy, Alan Ladd Jr., who ran 20th Century Fox. He's like, well, if you think this guy can do it, maybe we should do it. One guy said that. That's gone out the window. All the corporations now, everything is on a spreadsheet. Everything is looked at, marketing, all that. The problem is the essence of what makes great storytelling, the essence of is driven not by a corporation doesn't know how to tell a story, and the people that run corporations don't know fuck all about stories either. A lot of people think they do because I went to an Ivy League school and I got a master's in business. Good for fucking you. Tell me the last 5 books you read, or tell me your 5 favorite books, please. Or if you're going to be at a studio like Sony that's making comic book movies, all right, please tell me, why the fuck are you making a Madam Web film? Why are you making a Kraven the Hunter movie? Why are you making Morbius the Living Vampire and then deciding at the last minute, let's make the blood look black? The people that were driving these movies, they needed an auteurist vision. Even Kevin Feige, when they started the MCU, and remember they started the MCU at Paramount. Jon Favreau, his sensibility, that's what they needed. I mean, I know people, you can say, okay, he made Cowboys and Aliens and all that, but he made things like Zathura. And when they were starting out, they needed a filmmaker that wanted to reach. He was the perfect guy. It was him who went to bat for Robert Downey Jr. And that movie, even though it wasn't an auteurist vision, what they found was an auteur. I mean, remember, Favreau came up in independent movies. He wrote Swingers, and kicking off his own career and Doug Liman's career as well. You need people that are passionate. You can't look at a spreadsheet and a studio goes, yeah, we're going to make a Madam Web movie. Let's find a really talented female director from television who's never made a feature before and really maybe worked with special effects a little bit, but you can't do that. Now, I'm not saying, what's her name, Clarkson, the person who directed Madam Web? I'm not saying she's a bad director because she did great television. But she wasn't particularly, you can't tell me that she was like, I've got an idea. You're going to make a Madam Web movie? I love Madam Web. Oh my God. But isn't she an old woman? Wait a minute. What? Alternate realities? What are we doing? No, these are constructs that the studio is doing for either rights reasons, money reasons, or whatever. Those are the wrong reasons to make a movie. And what's so wild is there are probably talented filmmakers who would love to go make one of these movies. Like when I hear Ryan Coogler loves the X-Files and he wants to reboot it, bring it on. I'd love to see Ryan Coogler's reboot of the X-Files. I mean, you look at Ryan Coogler. And by the way, Ryan Coogler is a case study of what I'm talking about. Here's a guy that I've said this a million times before, but I'll say it again. The way I understood it, because I heard a story on NPR about how Creed got started. His mother was very ill, and he and his father were watching Rocky movies. And they love these Rocky movies. They were watching it together. You're watching movies with your dad, and you come up with an idea. He made Fruitvale Station, which is an incredible indie film, gets a lot of heat on him. And what does he want to do? He wants to make a movie in the Rocky universe. So he convinces Sly Stallone to let him write, and direct Auteurist Vision. What, the 7th Rocky sequel? Or it was the 6th sequel, because there's a Rocky, and Creed was after Rocky Balboa? That's what you want. You want to find a filmmaker that's talented, indie filmmaker. Kevin Feige pulled James Gunn out. James Gunn pitched him on Guardians, knew what he wanted to do, knew that James Gunn was a great storyteller because he wrote everything from, Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead to Scooby-Doo, and then he'd made Slither. And, I mean, you look at Slither and you're like, okay, that movie was made for $3 million, but if you look at Slither, you're like, I like that guy's sensibility. Again, auteurist filmmaker. Ryan Coogler made Creed. Why? Because he loved the character and he loved the franchise. Now, that doesn't work. You still have to be a great filmmaker. He was coming off of Fruitvale Station that proved he could tell a really good story. See, the thing that was really interesting for a while there is there's only 10 people in Hollywood that all the studios want to direct their movies. At any one time, it's rotating, but there's only like 10 people on the list that every major studio wants, the studios that control these IPs that they want to direct their movies. They're the same people, and they all want, well, that's because how do you justify $200 million on a movie? You have to mitigate your risks. Nowadays, what's so wild is they want these studios, we need control over the director. Do you? What the fuck do you know about making a movie? None of you people have ever made movies. You can watch movies, but you don't know. You don't know when you set up a shot, if one shot, what kind of lens are you going to use? What are you going to see in the shot? It's amazing to me. That's why there's the dire state that IP filmmaking is in, because you have these corporations that are spending too much money on their IPs, and everybody there has to make sure if they fail, one failure, they're out. I mean, I don't even know, unless you're at Sony apparently, and you're making. But the thing about Sony is they can look back. They had No Way Home. Remember, Sony still controls Spider-Man, and they get the majority of the money that the MCU Spider-Man movies make because they're distributed by Sony. The Spider-Man movies are not distributed by Marvel and Disney. They are distributed by Sony. So I think Marvel, whatever their cut is, you'll have to consult Deadline, 20%, 25%. So they've made Into the Spider-Verse, and I was just reading today that the third Beyond the Spider-Verse is the third movie. I thought that was already in production. I didn't realize that hadn't. How do you not have that ready to go? I guess because you're making Madam Web and you're making Kraven the Hunter. I mean, Aaron Taylor Johnson, thank God he's in Nosferatu, because I love that guy. Who doesn't love Aaron Taylor Johnson? And what those three movies have damaged not just Sony's Spider brand, but also Marvel. Because most people don't know the difference between Sony and Marvel. They just see that Marvel logo at the beginning. If I was Kevin Feige, man, I'd be pissed. Then again, I'd be pissed if I was Kevin Feige and I made the Marvels. But what can you say? Anyway. Let's see. Wow, there's a lot of people firing stuff in. Sheriff Carl says, congrats on True Noir. Sends in a tip. By the way, if you want to send in a tip and you don't want to use the super chat feature, there's a tip link. I always forget to say if you like and subscribe, comment down below, and if you want to send in a super chat or tip, you can. But there is a tip link that's different from a super chat link that's in the description. So if you'd like to do that, you can. Sheriff Carl says, from the Pacific Northwest, who I finally got to be face to face with on the 100th or 1000th episode. Seems like I'm on drugs. I haven't even had any liquor. Sheriff Carl, I got to see you face to face, and we're gonna drink soon. Sheriff Carl says, congrats on True Noir. Making anything so big is a major feat. One of the best movies ever made about the creative process and the heart and belief it takes is Hamlet 2. I go to that a lot when creating with my band. You hung your balls out there, dude. Respect. I did. And I'm going to be continuing. You know, it's the thing about True Noir is it's going to keep coming out. It's 10 chapters, and it's going to be coming out till the end of February. And if you make one misstep, you fucked up. But luckily, I have Max Allan Collins' script, and I don't think I will. If you're interested in our 10-chapter fully immersive audio drama, you can get it in either 2-channel stereo or 5.1. I have directed it. I was a producer on it. I edited it and oversaw all of the production along with my great team and my partner, Mike Bodden. You can go to truenoir.co right now, truenoir.co, and pre-order it. And the first 3 episodes, or as we like to call it, Act 1, will be available on Friday. So check that out. So thank you for that, Sheriff Carl. That's very nice of you to say. Dynaguy says, did you see Cavill's audition? Routh auditioned for Smallville too. I think Singer's visuals in Returns are overlooked. Some of the best Superman shots. I totally agree. I mean, Tom Siegel's an ace cinematographer. I loved it. Yeah, I saw. You'd be surprised at everybody who auditioned. There's a lot. Thomas Logan says, giving Corn Sweat the red trunks was a bad idea. You don't know that, Tommy. You don't know that. Wait to see the movie. Wait to see the movie. And giving him the red trunks, remember, the clothes have to fit the man, and the man has to fit the movie. And we will see. A lot of it, remember, it's all about tone. Seeing still frames, if there's one thing I've learned, and I've been on a lot of movie sets in my life, seeing behind-the-scenes photos of a film does not give you any insight at all into what it's like to actually watch a movie. At all. I mean, the stills, the production stills, sure, but a little bit. But behind-the-scenes photos have no bearing on whether a movie is good or bad. So that's what I'm saying. But hey, you can all come at me on Thursday afternoon. So, Meatwad and says, Rob, it's 2025 and some Hollywood execs are still blaming 2020 for their failures. Can we just never talk about Coof again? Guys, it's a dead horse. Society is back to normal. Let it go, my God. Yeah, you know, everyone wants to blame, you know, something on somebody that isn't them. And I agree. You can't blame things that happened 4 years ago on now. So, yeah, I agree with you 100%. Ralph sends in a tip and says, hi, Rob. I'm a big supporter of yours. Well, thank you. Thank you for what you do. I am an avid audiobook reader. I'm currently listening to The Pillars of the Earth. I love that book. I highly recommend it. Can you explain the difference between an audiobook and your audio drama? Thank you. I'm happy to do so. Our audio drama, I approached it as if it were a movie. So it is scripted. So Max Allan Collins, who wrote this book, True Detective, that the audio drama is based on. We came up with True Noir because we want to do more of his books. But so the conceit of True Noir is that a fictional character, Nathan Heller, played by Lex Luthor himself, Michael Rosenbaum, gets involved in actual historical events that have some question as to how they really went down. And Max does a really wonderful job of interweaving, as I've always said, the greatest fiction is the most truthful. Just like I said, the authenticity of the 21st century, the authenticity will be the currency of the 21st century. I also have said that the greatest fiction is the most truthful. And Max has done that with True Noir. So what we did was Max wrote a screenplay version of his book. He adapted it as if we were going to shoot it as a movie, we could. So the scenes that we have, well, you want me to play you a scene if you haven't heard it, and you can kind of hear the difference. I'll play you a scene right now in the middle of this conversation. I hope you don't go away. So here's a scene from True Noir. This is Michael Rosenbaum as Nathan Heller, and he has been summoned to a meeting with Jeffrey Combs, Dr. Herbert West himself from Reanimator. Jeffrey Combs was in, of course, Peter Jackson's The Frighteners. He was in Star Trek. He was Shran. He was Weyoun, the Vorta in Deep Space Nine. But here is Nate Heller talking to Mayor Anton Cermak. And Cermak is trying to manipulate him to join his hoodlum squad so they can terrorize the remnants of Al Capone's outfit in Chicago. It's only 2 minutes long, but I'll play it for you. A lot of you have heard it, but to answer the question, and I think this will give you a little example. It has music like a movie. It has sound effects like a movie. And it's directed, I'd like to think, as a movie with people having a conversation as if I wanted this to be like cinema. You just can't see it. So here's a clip of Michael Rosenbaum or wait a minute, maybe this is Katie Sackhoff. I'm not sure. Well, Katie Sackhoff's in it too.
I better be going.
I'll see you out. What will your testimony be at the inquest tomorrow?
The truth, I suppose.
Truth is relative. Even off the force, a fella can use a little help. Have you decided what line of work you'll be going into?
I only have the one trade.
What do you mean?
I'm a cop. A detective. I'm going private, that's all.
Who with? The Pinkertons? You got something lined up?
Just my own little agency.
I see. When were you planning on getting started?
Well, right away.
Oh, that's a shame. That really is.
How so?
Oh, the paperwork on these matters. A goddamn shame. Red tape. Sometimes an application for a license can be turned down for the most trivial of reasons. For no reason at all, actually.
So that's how it is.
I'll tell you how it is, Mr. Hiller. Go out of the department under a cloud and you tie yourself up in a police scandal. Months go by, and you're not going to get your private detective's license till it's over, till maybe, not never.
Suppose I agree to corroborate Lang and Miller's story.
I'm good at cutting red tape.
How good?
You'll have your license tomorrow, good.
And when the trial comes up, suppose I pull a double cross. Suppose I tell a different story, like the real one.
I don't think you do that. You're not a stupid man. Licenses get revoked for no good reason sometimes. The mayor giveth, and the mayor taketh the fuck away.
Shit. God damn it. I'll do it.
Thought you might. Sergeant Miller, get yourself a good night's sleep, Mr. Heller. Nate, you have a busy day tomorrow. Sergeant Miller here will see you home.
So that is a snippet from the first episode of True Noir, The Nitty Raid. And we have actors like David Strathairn, of course, Katie Sackhoff, Bill Sadler, Vincent Pastore, Louis Lombardi, Severio Guerrera. Severio Guerrera played Mocha Joe in Curb Your Enthusiasm. So it's all people you recognize, all voices you'll notice or recognize in it. As you can hear, I mean, that's just a conversation between two people, but I approached it like a movie. And it's going to be over 5 hours long when all is said and done. So I hope you dig it. Brandon Martin says Tarantino has said he wanted to do a review of Superman Returns. He thinks it's super underrated, as I do. I wonder if that will ever happen. You know, I hope so. I mean, look, you know what? The thing about Superman Returns is, again, it's a movie that did not give the audience what they wanted from a Superman movie. I mean, I think it dealt with really interesting questions of Superman kind of in the middle of an existential crisis. He went away from Earth and he came back and things have changed and he's kind of coming to grips with that. And we'd never seen a Superman. I mean, I'm so tired of people saying, oh, he's a stalker. No, he's trying to figure out what's going on. It's not like he's watching Lois undress or something. He's trying to figure out what's going on in her life and and he probably suspects, and I think he does, that he has a son with her. And of course, that's proven later. Oops, spoiler alert. So I think there's a lot going on in Superman Returns. It's different from your standard superhero fare, but I think as I get older and as people get older, I think people appreciate it. It's a different kind of a movie. And yeah, does it repeat beats from Superman the movie? People are always going, what about that land grab? Well, okay, but there's a lot more going on than just a land grab because Lex Luthor is wielding Kryptonian technology, which is really interesting, I think. So, Garrett Groover asks if I like French comics. I'm looking to get into them. Do you have any recommendations? I'm interested in sci-fi. Well, you know, people like the Inkle, Jodorowsky's The Inkle, and if you look up, there's a Humanoids Press. Humanoids Press does a lot of. I mean, I grew up reading heavy metal and people like Richard Corbin and Inky Bilal, and there's all kinds of stuff that are great. But look up anything from Humanoids Press. Look into getting back issues of Heavy Metal Magazine, because they were the first people to sort of break European artists over here. So it's definitely something to look into. So let's see who else is next here. Sheriff Carl, I already said that. Sheriff, good to see you. Ron Zilla says, Rob, you're the man. Well, I'm a man. I don't know if I'm the man, but I appreciate you saying so. We'll know on Thursday, won't we? Jay Bling says, I can't wait for my Christmas movie this year, Baby Girl. Oh, you know me, my endless love of redheads and Nicole Kidman and any kind of erotic thriller. I love it. I can't wait to see Baby Girl. Apparently, Nicole Kidman delivers. She brings the noise. Yes, I can't wait to see Baby Girl either. So I can't wait. Thomas Logan says Justice League 2 and 3, both written and directed by Snyder with $200 million budgets. And IMAX releases would have made $1.5 billion each at the box office. Warner Brothers morons. I don't know, man. Here's my problem with Zack Snyder. I think the Rebel Moon saga and to a certain extent Army of the Dead. Just because you're an auteur, sometimes maybe your reach exceeds your grasp. So I don't know. Sheriff Carl sends me $606.66 and says, this is for mentioning fucking Slayer. I don't know, dude. Something tells me you would have loved seeing Slayer at 12. Oh, I would have. I saw them with the flu at the Moore, and after 2 songs, I was cured. Snyder's Justice League was very Frazetta, and for that, I'm glad it exists. It's true. I agree, too. I like I said, I mean, for me, we started doing Midnight Metal because of Zack Snyder's Justice League. 1001 Johnny says, I think what you're saying is Superman needs to be a whimsical celebration of America, like how Back to the Future celebrated the nostalgia of the 50s through the whims of time travel, and Field of Dreams celebrated baseball through the whims of the spirits. Yeah, kind of like that. I mean, there's definitely an element of Americana that belongs in Superman. I mean, truth, justice, and the American way. I know that Superman is now a worldwide figure, but remember, Superman also is it was written by the sons of immigrants, and Superman does have in it the story of an immigrant, a story of somebody who's alone from a foreign land that immigrates to America and finds his destiny, and that's part of it too. Now, I don't know if they're afraid of saying truth, justice, and the American way. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. But that's definitely part of the DNA of the character. It'll be interesting to see, because I do think that Superman has become a worldwide figure. But you know what? I think we need to start celebrating what is great about the United States. I'm a little tired of listening to everybody talk about how terrible it is here. And indeed, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in America. But there's a reason why people still want to come to this country. And I saw Konstantin Kisin from Trigonometry give a speech at it was some place in Norway, a Norwegian conference. It just dropped today. It is great, and it talks about the West and this idea of the postmodernists and Superman does embody, from his very inception back in the 30s, truth, justice, and the American way. And what's wrong with that? What is wrong with that? I mean, for better or for worse, America still leads the world. Have we corrupted capitalism too much? Certainly. Does our healthcare, does our for-profit healthcare system let people down? Frequently. There's a lot of things you can complain about. Is our education system in the toilet because of postmodernism and identity politics and teachers that think it's more important that their identity is known by their students? Yes, this is problematic. You have to get back to the fundamentals of education. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. Everybody should be watching Schoolhouse Rock. Why doesn't every child, by the time they're 8 years old, know the lyrics to every Schoolhouse Rock song? I mean, what is a conjunction? And, but, and or. And what does lolly, lolly, lolly do? Unpack their adjectives. Come on, people. Let's get back on the Schoolhouse Rock train and bring education back to America. That's what we got to do. That's what we got to do. Darth Plato says the road to hell is paved with Ivy League degrees, or at least the destruction of venerable IPs. Imagination Connoisseur, Cam's Crash Courses just became a member of the channel. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. John Mosley, for a $10 super chat, says, I just hope James Gunn doesn't put too much forced humor and corny jokes into this Superman movie. He's well known for doing that in his previous superhero films, and that makes me nervous. Well, John, that is a valid concern. But I would say to you that that's all part of tone. And I think, look, with Guardians of the Galaxy, and especially with Suicide Squad or The Suicide Squad, you know, and you have King Shark looking over at a woman in the corner with a love interest who's in a, you know, an entryway as they're in the bus and getting all sad. That's one thing. But I do think that James Gunn is a smart writer. He's a smart guy. And I think he knows what he's doing. He knows that stupid humor. I'm not saying there's not going to be some stupid humor. Guy Gardner is in this movie. And I would expect some guy. I don't know if we're going to get the one punch scene. Oh, I desperately love to see that. If you guys haven't read the mid-'80s comedic Justice League, it's still funny. It really is. So you should check it out. But I think, John, that's what I'm saying. This new Superman movie is going to live and die with tone. And look, it's really easy. A lot of people always point to the first trailer for Superman Returns or the 5-minute trailer we showed at Comic-Con. Oh, it's one of the greatest trailers in the world because the Superman iconography put together, and I call it the Alberta sequence of Superman. If you go all Alberta and you go that Smallville stuff with John Williams's theme, and you see the cornfield and the camera panning around and Superman, give you that Americana, the America that's left us all. It's hard to beat that, but I think we're going to have to get a sense of the tone of this movie. And we're going to have to, it's got to show us, man. It can't just be Americana, because that's not what this movie is. I don't think his movie is going to be mythic, but I think it's not. Look, Back to the Future and Field of Dreams has a mythical element to it, but it's pretty grounded because of the family element. You know, and Amy Madigan and Kevin Costner go to a PTA meeting, you know. I mean, I think that we're going to know a lot on Thursday. We're going to know a lot. B Things says, am I crazy or a lot of people just weirdly anti-fiction these days? I don't think people are so much anti-fiction as they want to believe in the fiction that they've all come up with about themselves. That's what I think. And, you know, one of the things that kills me is, you know, I always say that the greatest fiction is the most truthful. I think what's happening today is people are creating these fictions about themselves that are patently untruthful. And they're buying into their own fictions that are lying to them. I think that's what's going on, if that makes sense. But it's interesting. So people are weirdly, look, now we live in a world of UGC, user-generated content. We, the people that love movies, we're people that look outward. We loved movies growing up because it said something. Films, the last observations I did about blue, red, and white, you know, Kieslowski's Three Colors, or actually it's blue, white, and red. Kieslowski's Three Colors trilogy. We look to cinema, or we used to look to cinema. Look, I've always loved genre films. I've always loved all different kinds of movie, whether it was schlocky horror, whether it was apocalyptic science fiction from the 70s, whether it was movies about movie making like All That Jazz or Richard Rush's The Stuntman or The Player, or The Big Picture. I love movies about the financial crisis like Margin Call and The Big Short. I love all kinds of movies. I love movies about the underdog, whether it's Rocky or The Verdict. I mean, I loved all that jazz, which is a combination of a lot of things. I love adventure movies like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and, of course, Jaws. I loved all movies because it used to be we would look outward. We'd look at the cinema to illuminate truths about ourselves. And I think what's really interesting about what you just said, about fiction, what B Things was saying, is that nowadays people are more, they're not interested in seeking out truth because they've got their own truth, which is hogwash and poppycock. Well, it's not my truth. There's only one truth. There's one truth. There's not my truth. There's not your truth. There is the truth. And we got to get away from that. You know, just because you feel it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm supposed to deal with your feelings. And it's weird. It's weird that we live in that. Aaron Singh says, a new Miss Tessmacher, can we get a Lacey Warfield? I don't know. That would, maybe. Who knows? I mean, to be honest, I think it's weird that Eve Tessmacher's coming back. I do think that is kind of odd, but I'll go with it. Pretty interesting. JK says, I just saw Paul Schrader's new film, Oh Canada, a beautifully raw look at mortality and probably my favorite film of his. I haven't seen I'm a huge Schrader fan. I've really liked First Reformed and what he's been doing lately. Constant Gardener wasn't his, but what was the other one he did? But of course, all the way back to, you know, everything from hardcore to American Gigolo. Paul Schrader's a really interesting filmmaker. Cat People, and the fact that he's still swinging, and he wrote things like Taxi Driver is amazing. But I really want to see it. I really want to see it. 6 Scale Mafia is a PGS hero for 20 months. 6 Scale Mafia says 6 Scale Mafia celebrates 20 months of membership. It's my truth. Deal with my feelings that I enjoy Strange New Worlds. I love you, Rob. See you Saturday. Well, what can I say? I don't know what to tell you there. Darth, but everybody should subscribe to 6 Scale Mafia's channel. If you like action figures, go to 6 Scale Mafia's channel and give him a sub. Darth Plato says, if Man of Steel is less a Superman movie because it can be called bleak, then Infinity War is less of a Marvel Avengers movie for the same reason. Is Man of Steel more bleak than Infinity War? No, because the tone of those movies is very, very different. I mean, look, in Infinity War, remember, the very difference that you're dealing with the fantastical more so in Infinity War. Okay, here's the difference. At the beginning of Infinity War, when Ebony Maw shows up with his troops, with the Black Order, in New York, look at that battle sequence. And within that battle sequence, it's Doctor Strange, and you've got Hulk who can't Hulk out. You've got Spider-Man who shows up, and listening to what Iron Man says, the banter between them. I mean, they're talking about Ben and Jerry's ice cream when Hulk falls through the roof, after he falls through the roof. It's the tone of that sequence. The tone of that is, it's both amusing, whimsical, colorful, but it's also got these aliens show up to just destroy the Earth and steal the Infinity Stones. The tone of that is masterfully. That is a hard thing to do. That's Marcus and McFeely, and that is the Russo brothers. When they had the script, they have the actors, and most of all, Infinity War is fun. You are having fun watching it, even at the end. Even at the end when Thanos snaps his fingers, the reason that works so well is because you've been having so much fun, and you think maybe they do a good job of making you think maybe they'll defeat Thanos. And it is a gut punch when you're watching that movie and you've been having fun. Even when you see Steve Rogers and you see Tony Stark get back together, and they finally have to find each other and all that. And the characters, well, actually, do they come back together? It isn't until they see each other in Endgame. But when the characters, when they reunite after Civil War, and there's warmth and there's emotion, whereas in Man of Steel, it's dour. There's always a joy in Infinity War, even when the universe is coming to an end. So that's kind of a different thing. So, I mean, I think so. Other people might not. You know, people might think it's different. Major Chai Chai, who's actually a retired major, gifted 4 memberships to Roland, Capkey, Laughing Man, Joe C, Josiah S. Let's see if I think I've got everybody. Garrett Groover says, I answer the French comics question. I just want to make sure I don't miss anyone. Okay, well, I'm going to go see. And I've got this article I really wanted to read. So I haven't even got to that article yet, but it fits in. So let me go up and see where I'm at here. Naveen, did I say that he's become an imagination connoisseur? Boy, there's a lot of stuff that I have yet to get to. John, this is interesting. Says Superman feels nostalgically desperate and looks to lean on humor, Trunks, and Williams-style score to avoid Snyder comparison. It lacks originality and sophistication mythological heroes deserve. Okay, John, I have to question you. How can you make that kind of assessment before you've seen the movie or even seen a trailer? Again, and this is the problem that I have with here's what I would ask everybody to do. James Gunn, if you look at the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and I like Guardians 2 more than a lot of people, those 3 films have a lot of heart in them. I don't think that more heart than you might think for all the wackiness and craziness that goes on. It's really interesting how James Gunn can make it so whimsical and fantastical and crazy, but still retain an emotional center to those films. And I would say, like, when you say nostalgically desperate, how can you say it's nostalgic when we've never seen a big budget Superman movie with those kind of brightly colored superhero characters in a Superman movie? And knowing that you've got one of the members of the Authority in it, and we've heard the music that we've heard already. That one piece of music, while it was a derivation of Williams' theme, we've never heard music like that in a Superman. In Superman Returns, John Ottman, by the way, wrote some amazing original music for Superman Returns, but he used the Superman theme in impressive ways. I don't know where you say that Superman, James Gunn's Superman, is nostalgically desperate. Like, where do you get that from? And how do you know it lacks originality and the sophistication mythological heroes deserve? Okay, I would ask you, let's go back to Kirk Allen. This is the first Superman. Was this a wrong approach to Superman? Was he not mythological enough? Was George Reeves not mythological enough? I loved this incarnation of Superman. And the funny thing is, especially when you say mythological heroes, I mean, I've been reading comic books for over 50 years. And mythological, what do you mean by that? And I think, look, I'm with you. I think Zack Snyder elevated the way we looked at those heroes. He took them to a godlike status. The same way when I first started seeing Alex Ross's art. He brought that mythological status to Superman. But I also grew up watching the Super Friends. And I don't think when I was watching Superman as a kid, watching the Super Friends, that I would say that the Justice League or the Super Friends were elevated to mythological status. Now, even in the comics, I mean, you go back and you read Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, where Jack Kirby introduced the whole fourth world in there. I mean, you can look and see what Jack Kirby was nothing if not, mythological, but he also still gave us Mr. Miracle. You know, he gave us Apocalypse. He gave us Darkseid. But he was the creator of those things, and I don't think when he first invented those things, I mean, some people, look, I totally get it, that people want the tone of what Zack Snyder brought. But you know what he didn't bring? He didn't bring the intellect. And I would love to have mythological characters. Zack Snyder brings us the visuals, no doubt. But there's not a lot there. And I would like to have seen, look, I would have loved to have seen a Batman v Superman movie where you have Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne having something going on, and Superman and Batman are having something totally opposite going on. And they're trying to, if you're going to buy into the fact that they're different from one another, I would like to have seen that, a movie where the Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice was the two of them trying to figure out how they're going to make their way in the world when they both exist and they both have to interact. But I think that it's unfair to judge a movie that we've literally not seen one frame of footage from. All we've seen is behind the scenes, and people have read leaks and all that. But look, there's one thing that I've learned as a lifelong movie fan. Even if you read 10 reviews of a movie, it does not take the place of sitting in a theater and watching a film at all. And nothing trumps that. You have to see the movie, and I give it a chance. I mean, here's the thing: without seeing anything, why worry? Why not just see what's going to happen? I mean, the movie studio believes in it. They had a big press event yesterday. James Gunn believes in it. All their chips are. I would say maybe there hasn't been a modern movie in history. I mean, maybe you could say The Force Awakens, but you know, as much as I dislike that film, it still made $2 billion. So what do I know? Well, the other two movies prove what I was saying about the first movie. I was like, this movie, it doesn't have a story. It's not going anywhere. There's nothing happening in it. The only reason we know Rey is on some kind of journey is because we saw 3 other movies that have a character going on a journey too. That movie doesn't earn anything from us. I think Superman, James Gunn's Superman, is going to earn your trust and respect. But you gotta be open to it. Mark Spector's Avatar said, I came out of hiding to say that Superman will bomb. We, the fans, don't want a rebooted cinematic universe. Wait a minute. Why? I mean that. Why? How do you know you don't want a rebooted cinematic universe? You're one good movie away from wanting a rebooted cinematic universe. Right? I mean, it's interesting for me to hear you say that. It will come out of, I came out of hiding. We, the fans, don't want a rebooted cinematic universe. Corn Sweat can't act his way out of a paper bag. If it bombs, I get the Eric Draven behind you. I'm almost ready. I'm almost willing to make that bet. But again, I have gone all in metaphorically and figuratively in on this. But I just think that here's what I don't understand. Here's what I don't get. These attitudes, and I get it, man. Look, we've got The Flash. We had the second Aquaman. You know, we had Black Adam. We've had all these things. But what we haven't had, you know, is, although did Andy Muschietti write Flash? I mean, that was, you know, maybe that's why I liked it more than I thought I did. Maybe he did. Maybe, but we haven't had that with Superman. I'd say, hey, no skin off your shoulders to give it a shot. Give it a chance. I mean, I'm a firm believer in you don't really know until you've seen it or read it. And it's coming out anyway. Why? You can choose. It's a lifestyle choice, man. You can choose to be interested in seeing it, or you can choose not to be. But why not wait and see? I think it's going to surprise you. And the thing is, we the fans, you can't say we the fans, I want a rebooted cinematic universe. I don't think that the fact of the matter is, Zack Snyder's universe didn't work. I liked it, but it didn't work. It didn't bring in the kind of money it was supposed to. The movies, even Superman of Steel was a disappointment in terms of how much it cost. Yeah, what it made, $600 million or something. They wanted that movie to make $1 billion. They wanted it to do Avengers numbers. And perhaps it should have. Again, the movie lacked joy. And now we can dig it and think it's cool, but it lacked joy. It wasn't fun the way it could have been. And that's why it didn't work as well as I think it should have worked. B Thing said, I extracted the audio from every episode of the original Star Trek. Maybe it's just because I've seen every episode a million times, but those episodes make really good audio dramas. Man, I'd love to get that from you. That's really interesting. Yeah, they do. Great writing will do that. Kevin Browning says, ever since I listened to the superb first 3 episodes of True Noir, I've adopted the phrases, fuck a duck, and variations of the mayor giveth and the mayor taketh the fuck away in my life. Kevin, no one will love hearing that more than Max Allan Collins. I mean, I love hearing David Strathairn say, fuck a duck indeed. I'm glad to hear you say that. I hope you enjoyed that. That means a lot. I love hearing that. And how great is when Rosenbaum says, fuck a duck indeed. It's so good. By the way, that's Kevin's 3rd super chat on this channel, so thank you for that. Tapa says, my name is a pseudonym, not a Star Trek reference. But it could be. If it was a Star Trek reference, you'd have an apostrophe after the T. But I'd like to think Tapa is a reference to maybe a dog. Tapa goes on to say, in Gunn we trust. Much love and respect, Rob. Yes. I thank you for that. So yeah, I agree. Thomas Logan says, Brady Corbett's 215-minute Best Picture frontrunner, The Brutalist, opened in IMAX today at AMC Century City, presented in glorious 166-1. Yeah, I'm going to go see it. I can't wait to see that. I'm dying to see it. I think I'm going to see it this weekend. Rated M says, love your audio series. Are you into other noir stories? My favorite series is the Grim Noir Chronicles by Larry Corella. Bronson Pinchot did great narrating it. I didn't know that. Yeah, I mean, I love noir. I mean, I've been watching noir movies, but I read a lot of, I read for a long time, I like Southern Fried Noir. Like, I really love James Lee Burke. I loved his Dave Robichaux novels, and they've been adapted. There was In the Electric Mist. That was the first Dave Robichaux novel I ever read, was In the Electric Mist with Confederate Dead. I was so obsessed with that book. So my brother gives me that book. And so I was in Seattle for some reason. I'm driving back to LA, and he gives me this book, and I started reading it on the drive, and I kept stopping at rest areas and to read it. I was so obsessed. And by the time I got to California, I had finished the book because I'd stopped so many times. I finished it on the beach in Santa Barbara. I love those books, the Dave Robichaux books. And they, Heaven's Prisoners, I think, was a Dave Robichaux adaptation, and In the Electric Mist. They've never got it right. And then also Andrew Vaux. If you've read the Andrew Vaux Burke novels, I love those. And I did read the Michael Connelly stuff. I love the Lincoln Lawyer stuff, and I love the Bosch stuff. I loved all the Don. I'm a huge Don Winslow fanatic, and he stopped writing books, but like his City trilogy that he ended his writing career with, but all like Gentleman's Agreement, and he wrote Savages that Oliver Stone adapted. The Winter of Frankie Machine is a great book. And California Fire and Life was the first Don Winslow novel that I read. I love Don Winslow. But I like a lot of modern noir stuff. But, I'm not as, Max Allan Collins is always talking about Raymond Chandler and all of the great Dashiell Hammett and all of those great writers. I really need to delve into more of that. But I'm glad you love the audio series, Rated M. Thank you very much for the kind words. Mark Spector's avatar says, I missed your super chat. Did you? I'm going between different. I'm looking at different super chat things, so I think that was the last one you sent to me. I hope I didn't miss another one. I've still got a lot more to go through. You guys are chatty Cathys tonight, which is good. I like that. Zianhu, is that how you pronounce your name? Zianhu. Have you seen the trailer for Love Hurts with Ke Huy Quan? Oh, Ke Huy Quan. I have, and it looks great. Sorry if you've already covered this. I got here late. I have not. I don't know if there's a new trailer out, but that movie looks great. I love the fact that Short Round used to be an assassin, and he's trying to live the quiet life, and then his sister comes back to get him or something, and all hell breaks loose. That movie looks really good. I'm so... you know what? Whenever you see that guy on any award show or whenever you see... I love the fact, because, he became a stunt instructor, a fight instructor in movies when he wasn't acting, after Goonies and Temple of Doom and things like that. But he was still in Hollywood. I love seeing his resurgent acting career. I love seeing him on Loki. It's so great to see him come back. But that movie looks really good. I really want to see Love Hurts. I'm excited. Captain Robert April has been a member for 28 months. Thrawn's Office is now an Imagination connoisseur. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Robert Giacinta says, thoughts on worst of the year lists. I can feel it is totally fair to make them. If you can make a best of the year list, why not the worst? You know what? As I get older, I saw on Michael Rosenbaum's podcast, I saw Kevin Smith talking about how he just kind of wanted to concentrate on things that he loved. And I kind of think that's true. There's so many people that are doing things that they hate. I kind of want to concentrate on things that I love. And I to be honest, I'm trying not to see. I've got too much physical media. I've got too many things, too many books I want to read. But yeah, I think it's fair to do 10 worst lists. Look, as long as I can still my one vice that I'm going to hold on to is hating modern Star Trek. I want to love modern Star Trek. I want to love modern Star Trek because I love Star Trek so much. I've loved it my whole life. But I'm getting Section 31. Now, even I, like Mark Spector's Avatar, I do not practice what I preach when it comes to Star Trek. I'm telling Mark Spector's Avatar, how do you know? Well, cut to Section 31's trailer. And I feel you. I know exactly where you're coming from. But see, the thing is, I've seen enough examples of James Gunn's work to know, and I've worked with him and know a little bit. I used to hang out with him a little at parties and stuff 20 years ago. I like James Gunn, and I've read his novel. So I trust in Gunn. And look, I even really like The Suicide Squad. There's a lot to love in that movie. So I have my fingers crossed. Jay Bermudez says, Senor, for $20 super chat. Thanks, man. Senor Burnetto, long time. Thanks for keeping our intellectual geek talk interesting all year long. Well, thank you. That's like the nicest compliment you can give me. Realized we have a friend in common recently in the form of Roger Lay Jr. He speaks highly of you, setting up a doc about stunts called Stunts: A Love Story, launching a Kickstarter campaign early in 2025, and would love your wisdom on board. Love it. I'm in. Feliz Hanukkah to you and all of your loved ones. Talk soon. Roger Lay Jr. Is one of my favorite people in the world. He's incredibly talented. He's produced movies for streaming services, but he and I first met. He was editing a documentary about Mark Zachary called The Table, and I was cutting a movie called My 11th that is still sitting on a shelf, which I would love to come out because I think it's great. It stars John Benjamin Hickey and Maren Hinkle from Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And Roger and I did the Star Trek documentaries. He and I worked together for 3 years doing all the Star Trek The Next Generation and Star Trek Enterprise documentaries that are on the Blu-ray. So Jay Bermudez, anything you guys are involved in or whatever, count me in. Royston S. Bailey says, am I right TNG was the only Trek show financially successful during most of its run? What can we learn from its success? What did they do right? Well, I think most of the Berman-era Trek shows were rather successful. I mean, if you look at what even Enterprise, which was probably the lowest rated of the shows, still got a far bigger share than most of the shows now. And the thing was, they weren't that expensive to make. You know, for 18 years, the Berman era of Trek was cranking out 26 episodes when they were rocking 26 episodes of a season, and sometimes with multiple Treks happening at the same time. Deep Space Nine started during the last season, in 93. Voyager started in 95. They were producing Voyager and Deep Space Nine at the same time on the same lot. so they were able to repurpose a lot of things and use them, which is pretty great. So, and they were all making money. They were all making money. They weren't losing money for the studio. And the thing was, while a lot of people didn't like, of course, Deep Space Nine as much as they liked Next Gen was obviously Star Trek at its zenith, but Star Trek was still popular. And, you know, Voyager, when it was on, was a copy of a copy of a copy. So, you know, yeah, what can I say? Thrawn's office said, first super chat, and happy to finally become a member. Well, thank you. And then right below it, right below Thrawn's office, Ryan Landis says, I'm reading the Thrawn trilogy for the first time, and I love it. The Heir to the Empire trilogy that's over 30 years old now. That is very cool. I mean, you're going to love that. Yeah, you're going to love the whole book, the 3 books. They're so much fun to read. So I think it's funny. Thrawn's office gives his first super chat, and you're reading the Thrawn trilogy, which is really, really cool. So Royston, I mean, I wanted to go back and reiterate, I think Star Trek was, in fact, successful, but obviously the Next Generation was 1994 was the year that Star Trek was its most popular. Star Trek The Next Generation went off the air, Deep Space Nine was on, and Generations came out, and Kirk and Picard were on the cover of Time magazine, which is pretty amazing. Michael R. says, hi, Rob, I just saw the new Lord of the Rings movie, but I don't see much about it online. Thoughts? Well, I'll tell you something. I have thoughts about the movie, but you know who has thoughts about the movie? Our member, Major Chai Chai, who's actually she's an actual major she's retired now in the Air Force, I believe. And she wrote me a letter. And since you ask, I would like to read Major Chai Chai's letter, her notes on War of the Rohirrim. Hello, Robert, and then I'll answer your question. Hello, Robert. I thought I'd relay my and my family's experience watching War of the Rohirrim, which we saw this past Saturday evening. I had been hesitant to see it, given the American trailer gave major girl boss vibes, but Andre from Midnight's Edge, his review convinced me to take a chance on it. Of course, I asked my family if they wanted to go, and so it became a family outing. But after seeing Friday Night Tight's discussion of the movie, I again became hesitant to go, as the majority opinion of the panel was that it was not worth it. I brought it up to my kids and offered to cancel the outing based on the reviews. A proud mom moment happened next. My son responded. He still wanted to go, so he could form his own opinion, which is what the right answer is every single time. When we saw War of the Rohirrim as planned. Afterwards, we discussed the movie at dinner, and below are some of our thoughts and observations. We all agreed that going to see War of the Rohirrim was not a waste of our time. My husband and children agreed that Hera was not a girl boss, and they wanted to watch the movie again when it's on streaming. The biggest complaint we all had was the incongruity in the animation. The photorealistic background and three-dimensional surroundings were disconcerting when juxtaposed with the two-dimensional animated characters. As for me, I didn't think that Hera was a girl boss either, but her capabilities seemed inconsistent. She could barely defend herself from her father's traitor. At the end, Hera bested Wolf in a 1-versus-1 sword fight. My husband countered my observation with his rationale that Hera was able to beat Wolf for 2 reasons. One is that Wolf had already been defeated once by Hera when they were children, and that mentally he was still defeated, which gave Hera an advantage. The other is that Hera went into the fight thinking she would die and had nothing to lose, which also provides an advantage, thus enabling Hera to defeat Wolf. Well, your husband's reasoning is very sound. I'll give him that. I also had an issue with Helm's death. His last stand at the gate would be in character for such a man, but the circumstances didn't warrant it at that point in the plot. Overall, for me it was decent, but it engendered no desire for me to see it again. The best thing about seeing War of the Rohirrim was the family time together, and that we were able to score the Hammer popcorn bucket. Your friend, Major Chai Chai. Well, Major Chai Chai, well, it's good that you guys had a good time, but I think that that was more than worth the time. I mean, again, my real objection to War of the Rohirrim is it was a story that it didn't need to be told. And while it's fine. I mean, for what it wasn't offensive. I wasn't offended by it. But at the end of the day, I mean, again, I was talking about this on Friday Night Tights, and I was talking about this on Versus. Just because you can do a thing, I always go back to Ian Malcolm, doesn't mean you should do a thing. And at the end of the day, I understand Warner Brothers wants to retain or something distribution rights. They're fighting with Amazon about who owns the rights to Lord of the Rings. Amazon paid their money. Warner Brothers owns the Lord of the Rings films that New Line produced. I get that. So they go make a movie like War of the Rohirrim. But at the end of the day, sometimes IPs outlast their welcome. I mean, I understand now they're going to make The Hunt for Gollum. The Hunt for Gollum is a couple of pages, I think, in Lord of the Rings. And while they can write that story, when you've already seen Lord of the Rings, and to a certain extent The Hobbit, are you going to ever be able to tell another story? Like, look, there are 3 stories in the Legendarium, and we were talking about these, Baron and Luthien being one of those stories. What I don't understand is why don't they go after those tales? Those were tales that Tolkien himself, Professor Tolkien himself, said that these were things that could be expanded upon and maybe turned into other mediums. This was his idea. And why not go into that? And people know those stories. And Baron and Luthien was something that was close to, I mean, those names are on Professor Tolkien and his wife's tombstones. And I mean, they keep mining these little things. And what happens is, in my mind, if you're going to take a story out and make a movie like War of the Rohirrim, you're going to end up working with tropes. You're going to end up working with the same kind of, okay, the hero's journey. You're going to do these tropes that become generic. And the thing is, it's the details, it's the Tolkienian nature of all of it that make Tolkien's work so interesting. And when you start trying to create things out of whole cloth, you're pressured to sort of tie, like every time they tie something together with Lord of the Rings and Rings of Power, I want to throw something at my TV. It drives me crazy because it's like 1,000 years before. There's no connection, and yet we got to put Gandalf here. Really? Do you? Because we have to have some connection. Because why? The stories they're telling were not fleshed out. They're in the appendices. So all these, unless you're fucking one of the greatest screenwriters of all time, where you can write something that's mind-blowing, all you're going to end up doing is giving us previously existing tropes that we've seen before. And you're not going to do it very well because you're going to give us tropes that don't have the Tolkienianisms that we need. Because you're not the writer that Tolkien was. It wasn't your life's work. It never is a good idea. It will never work. And that's one of the things about these. What's really the problem is we don't get the writers to work on these things. I mean, I know Philippa Boyens, and I love Philippa Boyens. She was delightful. Working on it just, you can't, it doesn't work. But I get why they do it. It's a monetary thing. But so there you go. I hope that answers your question, Michael. I just don't think it works. Captain Robert April says, embrace Lower Decks, good Trek to be had. You know what? Can't do it. Can't do it. I mean, I've watched all the episodes, but I can't embrace it. It is built for a certain kind of fan that isn't me. It isn't me. I can't do it. I can't do it. Major Chai Chai says, can we have a Section 31 hate watch party? You know what? I'm up for that. I'm up for that. That'd be fun. At least we'll be watching it and we'll know. Space 2314 says, hey, I was surprised to see you on Nerdrotic because I only saw you on John Campy's show. I respect that you don't just complain about woke and DEI. You're objective and intellectual, like John Schnepp. Well, you can't say anything nicer to me than that. I mean, you know, it was John Schnepp that put me on YouTube. You know, he called me up and said, come to this show. And look, here's my thing. I consider myself a student of all of this. I've been a student of it since I was a kid. Why are things the way they are? You know, and I've always tried to be that way. And for the most part, my default position is to like things. And so I don't want to dislike things. And John Schnepp was that way too. I mean, he and I tried to like things. And, that's why, and he knew that, he knew that we really got along well. And, he brought me, if it wasn't for John Schnepp, I wouldn't be on YouTube. I wouldn't be here. So yeah, I appreciate you saying that. That's very nice of you. But yeah, I mean, I try and be that way. I could complain. My whole thing is I'm not complaining so much about, the thing that baffles me about like DEI and inclusion is we were on a path for DEI and inclusion. There should be, those things should be true. There should be inclusion in people's, I want to hear everybody's stories. The problem is these initiatives came into a world where it already existed. Everybody was moving forward, and now what and by the way, this was by design. We have been programmed, and it's been, what is it, Yuri Bezmenov? Look up Yuri Bezmenov's, he was a Russian defector that came over and was in Canada in 1984. Watch his hour-and-a-half interview. We're being played. All of Western civilization, they couldn't defeat us militarily, so there has been an ongoing program, and they'll tell you, to ideologically capture our youth. And it's being done. It's being done. Capture the academics, capture the youth, ideologically. I mean, I hate to bring it up, but the manifesto of the female student who took a pew-pew to a school, very, very tragic, horrible story. Read her manifesto. Wow. Yeah, it's everyone's fault but yours. And blame everybody, the world, and you want to take people. It's just what's going on, the medication, the ideological capturing, it's weird, but it's not great. BDEP has been a member for 16 months, says congrats on TRUE NOIR, Rob. I haven't had a chance to finish the first 3 yet, but what I've heard so far is really enjoyable. Oh, I love to hear that. That's the best I can do, so thank you very much. Rollo Tomasi, which is a great reference to LA Confidential, James Ellroy. Rollo Tomasi, does Soups wear underwear under the red trunks? I think probably. Maybe. Why not? Yeah. This is very funny. Thomas Logan says, after about a week of almost 100 DVD and Blu-ray copies being sold on Evil Bay at $100 a pop, Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later is finally available on digital in 1 hour. Is that true? They're finally they have to put 28 Days Later out on digital after that great, they're making 3 of those movies. And that trailer was great. That's one of my favorite trailers I've seen in years. So that's exciting. That's exciting. So I didn't know that. That is amazing. Well, listen, everyone, this has been a long and enjoyable chat. I didn't expect to go this long, but I want to end this chat, and I want to say to everybody, I want to thank everyone for generously supporting this channel via super chats and tips. And once again, please go if you're interested. True Noir, The Assassination of Anton Cermak. You can pre-order it at True Noir, TRUENOIR.co. You can pre-order all the episodes now, or you can wait. They're going to be available on every single podcast platform. I think it's going to be $2.99 an episode. I don't know if we're still selling the whole series at a discount. And if you are a Kickstarter subscriber, you will get things sent to you early. And what you will be getting, I think, on Friday is the History of the Mystery video, the first episode of History of the Mystery. And all of those will appear on the eventual Blu-ray as well. So look, I might have egg on my face on Thursday afternoon. And I will come to confront you all on Thursday. I will be here. I promise that. I will be here. And if it sucks, we're going to have a long conversation. We're going to have a long conversation about this trailer. And I can't wait to see. I don't think I've been as excited to see just a glimpse of something like this in a long time. And I think that'll be great. Robert Giacinta says, thoughts on Disney removing a trans storyline from an animated show. Was it removed? I haven't heard about this yet. Removing a trans storyline from an animated show. I don't know what you're referring to because I don't know this story, if it's something new. I think that's lame. First of all, it might be a good story. And that's the thing. I mean, you know, that here's what I find fascinating. I mean, I don't think that we should ever not want to hear the stories of people that exist in the world. And gender dysmorphia and the trans community have a lot of stories to tell, a lot of really interesting stories to tell that I think are valuable. What I don't like is when people start going after somebody, like what happened with when Scarlett Johansson was going to play a trans character and tell a story, and people went after her saying, well, you can't have that person play that character because they're not trans. I think that's insane. Actors are actors. Unless you have a trans actor that has the proven box office appeal of Scarlett Johansson, and I'm not saying that her movies are the greatest movies in the world. Some of her movies didn't make any money, but she made things like Under the Skin and Ghost World, which are great. And she was also in Avengers movies. You still have to have actors that are going to put butts in seats. That's just the economic reality. I mean, we live in a world where Philadelphia, and I've said this before, Gus Van Sant's Philadelphia, actually it wasn't Gus Van Sant, but Philadelphia, the movie Philadelphia, starred Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington. Tom Hanks played a gay lawyer who was dying of AIDS, who his own law firm discriminated against him. And that film did so much to make our society's awareness about what was going on with the AIDS virus and what it was doing to decimate the gay community. And nowadays, if someone tried to make that movie, they would protest and say, well, you can't make that movie because Tom Hanks is not an actual gay person. Well, is any actor supposed to be the people they're actually portraying? That's what acting is all about. And that movie did a lot of good. And I think the world is better off that a movie like Philadelphia got made. So I don't know why they would remove a trans storyline from an animated show. But the real question is, was it appropriate to put a trans story? Here's what I don't understand. I'm glad that I got to have a childhood. I'm glad that there was a lot of things in my childhood. And this is not because I come from a place of privilege. And I'm so fucking tired of that. Like what, everybody's life is easy? Like you came from, so everybody has different strife and problems in their lives. Everybody. They just have different strife and different problems. But it doesn't make sense to me that somebody's suffering or somebody's family problems are now, we're now deciding who has more suffering or trauma in their lives. You're coming from a place of privilege. Really? I've tried to work in Hollywood for 36 years. You tell me about what privilege did I have? You know how many sleepless nights when I didn't know where my next meal was coming from because I hadn't been paid by a studio I'd done incredible amounts of work for? You know how much strife I had in my life because I did choose this profession. But everybody's got different things going on in their lives. And it's so weird that we now live in a place where, you have to admit that you come from a place of privilege. I have to tell you, in my life, I don't interact with enough people where I'm not exposed to enough of everybody else's privilege. I'm trying to get by in my own life. And it's rough. So everybody has it tough. Anyway, so I don't know what they did. I don't know anything about removing a trans storyline. But the real question is, does a trans storyline need to be in animation for kids? I don't know. Because what happens then is because if the content of a storyline supersede, like if you're telling a story and you have a side character whose identity issues somehow interact or overshadow the story that's being told, I don't think that's a great story. I mean, if there's a trans storyline in a show, make it about that and have a good reason for it to be there, just like any other story. If you want to tell a story about religious persecution, I don't know if an animated show for kids is a place where you need to deal with religious persecution, or unless it's done in a very unique manner. You still have to let kids be kids. We still have to let that happen. And you know what we can do? Schoolhouse Rock. Schoolhouse Rock. Clarence Markwell says, if they shot the Genesis Project missile into V'ger, could it have created the Nexus? No. No, it couldn't have. It could not have. So I don't know. Darth Plato says, I missed a tip. I'm not even done with it. I haven't even got to the tips yet. Let's see. I haven't even looked over there yet before I was leaving. I don't know, man. I'm looking. Unless you sent one in recently. A tip. Have I missed any? Here, let me look. Sometimes they don't show up. No. Oh, here. Yes, there's one. Oh, I see it. That's a super chat. That's not a tip. I am looking, Darth. I am looking down this list. I see Sheriff Carl. Darth Plato says, your Infinity War. That there was that tip. Oh. This is an interesting tip. What's wrong? Darth Plato asks, what's wrong with shifting a tone to dark? Empire Strikes Back was a darker tone than Star Wars, and Empire Strikes Back got a lot of negative reviews saying exactly that. A shift in tone is not a bad thing per se, and Man of Steel is not less of a Superman movie because it is darker. Well, look, here's the thing. It's how, again, it's a tonal issue. I mean, Superman, I would say that Man of Steel is, it's like Superman watches his father die. In Superman the movie, Glenn Ford has a heart attack, and Superman says, all my powers, and I couldn't save him. Are you telling me that Superman couldn't have done something, that Clark couldn't have done something to save his dad? When you're watching Superman watch his father die, that's a big deal. That's very different than having your father die. That's, you have to allow your father to die so you don't, your secret. I mean, Superman in the middle of a tornado, I never believed that he couldn't move fast and just get there, and people are like, what happened? They wouldn't have known what happened. They wouldn't have seen what happened because it's in the middle of a tornado and they would have forgot, or whatever was going on. So it's a tonal issue. Empire Strikes Back is dark, sure, because the rebels get routed at the beginning. But Han and Leia, it's still a fantasy adventure. You can have fantasy adventures that are dark, but Superman, Man of Steel, is, I mean, look, here's the difference. Look at Zod, Ursa, and Non in Superman 2 compared to Zod in Man of Steel. I mean, when he's in the White House with E.G. Marshall and he looks down at the carpet and says, I see you are practiced in worshiping things that fly. Good. I mean, that's a tonal issue that is nowhere to be found when Zod is there. It's a whole different thing. And you know it is. You know it is. But on that note, I'm trying to I never get off these shows. I'm going to get off the show now. And we'll have another discussion. I didn't even get to read the articles I wanted to read on Toxic Fandom, and they're good ones. But again, I want to thank you for all your support, everybody. And we're going to be back on Wednesday. Actually, tomorrow's Wednesday. We're going to be back on Thursday to talk Superman. What do people think? I can't wait to hear what you think. And if I have to eat crow, and I don't mean the Eric Draven crow, if I have to eat crow, I will. I will tell you my honest thoughts. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen and support True Noir. Go pre-order it right now at truenoir.co. Have a better night.